Hokage, Chronicle of the True Farewell. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author, we are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 126, The Technique of the Wild-Haired Lion, Jiraiya's Request. Seeing this memorable scene from the anime come to life, Uchiha Chi's eyes flickered, a touch of emotion filling him. His favorite Hokage character in his previous life had been this unruly hero. Seeing him now, he felt the surprise of unexpectedly meeting his idol. Just as he was about to respond, a portly, panting ninja ran up from behind Jiraiya. Jiraiya-sama, we have information from the root. Regarding tomorrow's operation, we require your immediate confirmation. Hearing this, Uchiha Chi looked up to see the young man, with long red hair and a boar-like build. He wore a Konoha forward protector and an armored vest with a large food character emblazoned on it. Uchiha Chi immediately recognized him as the Joe of the modern-day Inoshijo sect Akimichi Choza. Hearing what he heard, Uchiha Chi raised an eyebrow. Information from the root, and tomorrow's operation? This reminded him of the mission Ryoma of Urim had told him about yesterday, about penetrating the rear of Tsunagakure. Could something have gone wrong? Huh? Jiraiya couldn't help but frown at the news. He quickly exchanged a few words with Akimichi Choza, but soon, Akimichi Choza's expression darkened. He nodded, then turned and ran off to the main tent. Jiraiya then turned and looked apologetically at Uchiha Chi. I had wanted to spend the whole day today teaching you this technique, but it seems I don't have time. Jiraiya smiled helplessly, then swiftly pulled a red-covered scroll from his red robe and pressed it against Uchiha Chi's forehead. This ninjutsu is called Secret Ninjutsu, Wild-Haired Lion Jutsu. Don't let it down, boy. Uchiha Chi was slightly startled, then took the scroll from his forehead, feeling a small leap of joy, as if his idol had suddenly given him 5 million. He immediately regained consciousness and looked at Jiraiya in surprise. Jiraiya-sama, why did you give me such a precious ninjutsu? Esoteric ninjutsu, in the ninja world, belonged to the major esoteric families. They were extremely precious. And Jiraiya had given him a set of ninjutsu. This meant that the scroll must contain the 3 ninjutsu he had created. Ninjutsu, Needle Jizo. Ninjutsu, Needle Jizo. Ninjutsu, Wild-Hair Lion's Jutsu. By manipulating chakra, one can harden and lengthen one's hair, creating a forest of needles. Whether attacking with Needle Jizo, defending with Needle Jizo, or forcing the Wild-Hair Lion's jutsu to bind, this set of ninjutsu can be considered one of the most mechanically perfect defensive ninjutsu. Many ninja in the ninja world also manipulate their hair, but neither the needlehead senbon of the Kurigakure watermelon mountain pufferfish demon, nor the hair-controlled sonic attack techniques of the Sand Village could be as comprehensive as Jiraiya's. In the current ninja world, only Kushina's red hair summoning technique can easily surpass this move. The most important thing is that it has no threshold and does not require mastering attribute changes, as long as the hair is long enough. It can be said that this set of ninjutsu can conservatively create an extraordinary genin. Uchiha Chi looked at the scroll in his hand, his face a little embarrassed. He did know Jiraiya, but he was sure that Jiraiya must not have known him before. Now the highest commander of Konoha, who was in charge of the border of the Rain Country, suddenly gave him such a precious thing, which seemed a bit abnormal no matter how you looked at it. This is too precious, I can't accept it. Besides, I don't lack these techniques. Uchiha Chi shook his head, his eyes determined, and decisively pushed the scroll back. However, Jiraiya leaned over, holding his head, looking into his eyes with a pair of dark and deep eyes, and then said heavily, Uchiha Chi, this is my personal request. I can see that Orochimaru values you very much. On the night when I met him again and drank with him, the excitement and eagerness in his eyes when he mentioned you, I don't know how many years I haven't seen it. He paused, his eyes slightly drooping, and sighed. The war took away Orochimaru's parents very early, and soon, his disciple Naoki, his close friend Gen, and his teacher and friend Hatake Tsukumo died one after another. I can feel that Orochimaru is now like a kite with a broken string. And I don't know when he will leave Konoha completely. I can no longer see the light in his eyes, but, Jiraiya took a deep breath, and rubbed Uchiha Chi's fluffy hair with his big hands. Your appearance has brought light to his eyes again. I know you're an Uchiha ninja, possessing the Kekkei Genkai Sharingan and a vast arsenal of ninjutsu. You'll never lack this skill, but this is already the most valuable thing I can offer." Jiraiya sighed, pushed the scroll back, and pressed it against Uchiha Chi's chest. Then, his eyes met with Uchiha Chi's grave. "Please, your teacher, Orochimaru, is very important to me. Think of it as an S-rank mission. I'll pay the reward, then I ask that you be the string that connects the kite and prevent him from going astray again. So, Uchiha Chi, please live." Uchiha Chi looked up, stunned. The sidelong glance in Jiraiya's voice confirmed his words, and his heart sank. He had never imagined that Orochimaru truly valued him so much. Nor had he imagined that he would become part of the Hokage's unique bond. When Orochimaru had previously said he wanted to adopt him as his son, he'd thought it was just a joke, that Orochimaru was merely using him as a simulator, hoping to get the answers he wanted from Uchiha Chi. But now, this. Jiraiya patted Uchiha Chi's shoulder, his spirits rising as he stood up. He laughed heartily. "Well, of course, don't feel too stressed, kid. As a senior, it's my duty to protect the younger generation. I'll take good care of you." With these words, Jiraiya smiled broadly, brushed past Uchiha Chi, waved back, and walked away with his back to him. His wooden clogs clattered against the ground, his footsteps drifting in the wind. Soon, Uchiha Chi was the only one left on the street. He stood in the middle of the street, holding the scroll in his hand, silent for a moment. He didn't know what emotion was flowing through his heart, but he suddenly realized that the difficulty of committing insurance fraud had inexplicably increased. He let out a deep breath and stuffed the scroll into his arms. Now that he has it, he must do his best. Fight with everything he has. And this, in fact, is not just an option. With a mentality that has quietly changed a little bit, Uchiha Chi shook his head. For him who is barely able to become a ninja and whose physical qualifications are poor, the only thing he can rely on is fighting on the edge of death to make the steel of his heart play the greatest effect. If he wants to cheat insurance and go home, he must fight to the death. If he wants to save the world and rewrite the tragedy, he must also fight to the death. There is no such thing as letting the water go or deliberately dying. If he doesn't fight, he is a pure waste, and if he doesn't fight, he is completely dead. So, no matter what the reason, there is only this one path in front of Uchiha Chi. Tomorrow's battle, the battle to assassinate Raza, the battle to rush into Awakens, the battle to face the tailed beasts, from Konoha to the land of hot water, from the land of hot water to the land of rain, from the land of rain to the land of earth, die on the road of endless battles, or fight through this third ninja world war. Chapter 127, The Ninja War Begins. Illusion Sharingan. Before leaving, Jiraiya couldn't tell what he said to Kimichi Choza. In the brief moment between his conversation with Uchiha Chi and his departure, the atmosphere of the entire camp suddenly changed. Groups of ninja playing cards vanished, leaving only scattered cards on the ground. Konoha ninjas emerged from the tents one after another. Some were fully armed, some bandaged, some carrying enormous shuriken. Even the dog squatting at the tent door was carried away by its owner by the scruff of the neck. A long line formed in front of the distribution warehouse. Ninja tools were dumped out of sacks with a clanking sound, and the sounds of numbers being called and accounts being reconciled echoed. In the central open space of the camp, radish-sized genin children carried wood to build a platform. Although it was still daytime, kerosene was already burning in the bonfires surrounding the open space. The clatter of footsteps, whispers, the rustle of luggage being checked, the crackling of charcoal in the bonfire, the hissing of a kunai twirling between fingers, all these sounds and scenes intertwined, creating a solemn and weighty atmosphere. This made Uchiha Chi realize with absolute clarity that war was imminent. Thump, 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 thump. His heart raced in the tense atmosphere, his blood boiling. Even the small tail in his abdomen suddenly stood up, sensing the overwhelming fear and darkness surrounding him. It whipped its tail and banged it against a food bowl, alerting its foolish master to quickly open it and feed him. But this fierce wind of war still needed time to brew, requiring the gradual heating of boiling oil. The root ninjas hadn't arrived yet, and Aburane Ryoma, his sworn brother, hadn't summoned him. Before then, Uchiha Chi still had a training session to complete. Even with his talent, he probably wouldn't be able to master any new tricks in a short time. But if he was going to fight to the death with all his might, he couldn't miss any opportunity to become stronger. With this thought in mind, Uchiha Chi's eyes fixed. He went against the flow of people, brushing shoulders with the advancing Konoha ninjas, and strode out of the Konoha camp. Behind the Konoha camp lay a tranquil forest. Silence reigned. Crows fluttered their wings, perched on branches, watching Uchiha Chi's progress. Unlike the stinking miasma of the rain country, this place was a dark and gloomy place in a different sense. Massive trees towered to the sky, their branches tangled in a maze, letting in no sunlight. Even at noon, it was cool and refreshing. Deeper in the water, a pool of water 100 meters square could be seen. A figure sat cross-legged on a large rock in the center, eyes closed. Sunlight shone down, creating a golden rim around him. The man, wearing an Uchiha shirt and a genin vest, was tall and stern. It was Uchiha Shinichi, who had been waiting for him for a long time. As he approached, a subtitle suddenly popped up before Uchiha Chi's eyes. Uchiha Shinichi is very unhappy with your tardiness and wants to shove your head to the ground and piss on your face. As the subtitles appeared, the young Uchiha youth, sitting cross-legged on a large rock, suddenly opened his eyes, filled with impatience. 3 jet-black magadamas whirled in his eyes, turning slightly. Then, in a cold voice, he said, including the 3 hours this morning, you're already 4 hours late. Honestly, he said, Uchiha Chi. You're really annoying me. Hearing this, Uchiha Chi frowned slightly, confused, and couldn't help but glance at the subtitles again. This was the man Uchiha Shisui had described as both strong and gentle? If he hadn't seen the subtitles, knowing who wanted to piss him, he would have been almost fooled. Seeing the other man ready to accuse him, Uchiha Chi raised an eyebrow. He didn't bother to talk, and immediately illuminated his Sharingan, looking calmly at Uchiha Shinichi, deliberately avoiding his gaze and only looking below his chin. What do you want to do? If you want to fight, no problem, I'll fight you to the end. Uchiha Chi placed his palm on the hilt of the sword at his waist and flicked it, ejecting a fragment of the Kusanagi sword, ready for battle. However, seeing Uchiha Chi's attitude, Uchiha Shinichi shook his head and sneered, I have to say, you're lucky. This incident along the way prevented you from reaching Hell Valley. That's why you've had this illusion, thinking you're capable of challenging a 3 Magadama Uchiha? He paused, then snorted coldly, suddenly wiping his Sharingan and sneered, before I teach you ninjutsu, I want to teach you how to address a senior. I'll give you one move, Uchiha Chi, go all out. If I even move, I lose. Hearing this, Uchiha Chi frowned slightly, one hand grasping the hilt of his sword. He subconsciously sensed something was amiss, but couldn't pinpoint what. From the beginning, he had deliberately avoided meeting the other man's 3 Magadama Sharingan. Logically, he shouldn't have been caught in a genjutsu. But the other party was so confident. Could he be the Uchiha clan's unrivaled master? The thought of this possibility filled Uchiha Chi with a sense of wonder. However, since the other party had asked for a blow, Uchiha Chi had no choice but to give his all and fulfill his wish. Without a word, Uchiha Chi raised his hands, one hand clasping his heart, the other his abdomen, his fingers twisting the surface of his skin. Blazing white flames appeared beneath the fingers of one hand, while beneath the fingers of the other, a darker Boris pattern spun counterclockwise along his fingertips. Instantly, fire style, chakra mode, forbidden technique, flesh transformation, zero tail, dark awakening, and immortality were all activated. A raging storm of flames suddenly erupted from the silent forest. A huge sun suddenly rose above the plain, and within it, a dark cocoon of light trembled quietly, looking like a giant Sharingan without a Magadama. Within the eye of the sun, a young man quietly tore through a cocoon of pitch-black light. Gripping a flowing flame sword, he calmly and indifferently stepped out. He was tall and handsome, his waist-length black hair swirling wildly. He exuded a unique aura, calm, fiery, and tyrannical, a blend of majesty and splendor that captivated the eye. The next moment, the young man raised his sword and aimed it at Uchiha Shinichi, who sat in the center of the pool. He calmly uttered the name of his move, Kana, boom. The flowing flame sword surged in the wind, instantly reshaping itself and unleashing a massive, rising flowing flame sword. With a single strike, it abruptly spanned half the pool from the edge, hurtling towards Uchiha Shinichi, who sat in the center. The 40-meter-long flowing flame sword materialized. The sudden surge of air instantly knocked down a circle of trees. However, after launching the sword, Uchiha Chi frowned slightly. Shadow clone? No, not even a puff of smoke. The sword fell off. It passed right through Uchiha Shinichi, hitting nothing. Then, Uchiha Chi carefully sensed his body's condition. His expression twisted slightly, and he let out a dull sigh, muttering indignantly, "Damn it. I'm under an illusion again." The blazing flames generated by fire-style chakra mode should have given him a tangible burning sensation, like being grilled on a grill. And with Zero Tail's dark chakra mode, his composure shouldn't have been this calm. So, under an illusion. Uchiha Chi frowned, unable to understand what had gone wrong. And when, exactly, had he been caught in the illusion? And at that moment, in the real world, Uchiha Shinichi, sitting in the middle of a pool, forming hand seals to maintain the illusion, swallowed hard. His eyes pierced through reality, taking in the scenes in the illusion world, his expression contorted slightly. Sweat instantly broke out on his forehead and back. He stared at the unremarkable boy standing by the pool in disbelief, feeling an indescribable absurdity and creepiness. This kid clearly hadn't realized he'd been under a genjutsu from the moment he first laid eyes on the pool. Which meant, then, that he would unleash those terrifying, overwhelmingly unresistible attacks. Perhaps, he would actually be able to. Uchiha Shinichi panted frantically, his eyes filled with pure disbelief. He'd prepared to give Uchiha Chi a thorough lecture in the illusion world on shuriken techniques, fire escape techniques, and the use of the Sharingan, only to have him, to the kid's amazement, boastfully inform him that it was all an illusion. But why had the script suddenly, like a genetic mutation, begun to tamper with itself? Are you kidding? How could you be so strong? Chapter 128. This is the real illusion. Standing still, Uchiha Chi let out a heavy breath. His gaze fell upon the pool before him. After some reflection, he had a rough idea of how he had fallen prey to the genjutsu. Besides creating illusions through eye contact, Sharingan illusions actually have a special method, foam illusion. This special technique can only be performed by ninjas of the Uchiha clan, masters of illusion. In the original novel, the future Uchiha Itachi used this technique to project his illusion onto external objects, hypnotizing his enemies. After forming a hand seal, the enemy could be affected simply by seeing his fingers. Furthermore, those with advanced skills could even project the illusion onto objects other than his fingers, such as crows, clones, or even the surrounding environment. Uchiha Shinichi used this technique, creating a visual connection between his Sharingan reflected in the water and Uchiha Chi's. In that instant, he had fallen prey to the illusion. But understanding it is one thing, breaking it is another. The rumor circulating in the ninja world that if you encounter an Uchiha in a one-on-one fight, you must flee stems from the unbreakable nature of this visual illusion. Unlike non-dijutsu illusions, which can be broken by disrupting one's own chakra flow, Sharingan-powered genjutsu can only be broken by disrupting the chakra flow of others. For example, the Kumagakure trio that Uchiha Chi encountered earlier when he left the village, even though they saw the danger posed by Uchiha Chi, maintained a two-person formation to support Uchiha Setsuna, precisely to counteract the illusions that could strike at any moment. At this moment, if Uchiha Chi wanted to reverse the situation, he had to find outside help. And, as it happened, he had a companion. Soon, Uchiha Chi's gaze fell on his abdomen. A tailed beast Jinchuriki can be immune to illusions by coordinating with the tailed beasts. I should be considered half a tailed beast Jinchuriki, so, Uchiha Chi's eyes shifted darkly, and he immediately slapped his abdomen and shouted, "Stupid snake, it's time for dinner." As the words fell, chew, in the abdomen, hearing its silly master's call, the little Zero Tail perked up its head, looked up with a look of confusion, flicked its tail and scratched its head, confused. It wondered what its silly master was barking at. What was going on? Sensing the unusual movement of chakra in its abdomen, Uchiha Chi raised an eyebrow, thinking there was hope. He coughed, channeling his chakra, and gently channeled his thoughts to the small Zero Tail within him. "Zero, you're already a mature tailed beast. You must learn to move on your own and help your master unlock the second stage. That way, I'll have more motivation to feed you. Do you understand?" The hole in Zero Tail's mask blinked, then it raised its head in shock. It looked at this shameless pile of chakra from its master. Ever since it took up residence in this birdman's body, aside from that time in the cave, this foolish master had never actively nurtured it even once. Every time it demanded chakra, he forcefully drained it, completely disregarding its feelings. Heck, he was a complete jerk. Now, he had the nerve to ask for chakra? And demanded it move on its own? Is that what a human being would say? Uchiha Chi looked at the Zero Tail's uncooperative attitude, and 3 dark lines immediately crossed his forehead. After a moment's hesitation, he reluctantly raised a finger. As long as you do this, I'll take you on a daily tour of the wounded camp. Upon hearing this offer, the 4 red hairs on Little Zero's forehead immediately stood up like antennae. Chirp! Chirp! Of course it's true. Little Zero rested his hand on his cheek, pondering for a moment before swinging his tail across his body, forming a cross. Chirp! Uchiha Chi's eyes widened and he shook his head vigorously. No, 10 extra times is too much, and that's 4. You illiterate. Upon hearing this, Little Zero flew into rage of impotence, lashing his tail wildly with a hilariously adorable cry of chirp. Once a day, plus 2 extra times? If you do it, then do it. If you don't, forget it. I don't believe that Uchiha Shinichi, that jerk, would dare to kill me. Uchiha Chi shook his head firmly. He had so many scrolls to memorize, how could he find the time to walk his tail beast? Honestly, who would walk their dog twice a day? After some haggling, Uchiha Chi and Xiaolingwei finally agreed on a price. Time seemed to stand still in this chakra-connected space. While the man and the tail beast negotiated for the better part of a day, in the outside world, only a single second had passed. And in that single second, the situation suddenly shifted. Outside, Uchiha Chi stood by the pool, his eyes glazed over, frozen in place, as if a fish on a chopping board, at the mercy of the slaughter. But the next second, a surge of intense, violent black chakra suddenly surged from his body. Around his feet, the wind blew, growing stronger and stronger. The gust of wind lifted Uchiha Chi's black robe high, revealing his toned abdomen. A dark pattern resembling an Ouroboros appeared on his abdomen, creaking and rotating on its own. Uchiha Shinichi, who is maintaining the illusion, suddenly saw his expression change drastically. He stared at the imp in disbelief. His illusion had clearly been successful, and the imp was alone, without any external support. But at this moment, another force suddenly surged within the imp. If he continued, his illusion would likely be broken. Uchiha Shinichi's brows furrowed, and he gritted his teeth, his eyes growing increasingly ferocious. The powers in the illusion world can be fabricated with a mind. This must be this imp's scheme. He can't possibly be that strong. Determined to uphold his dignity as a senior, Uchiha Shinichi stood up, his gaze fixed on Uchiha Chi with a sinister look. If he didn't kill him, crippling him would serve as a lesson to the younger generation. Reaching out, a kunai fell into his hand. Uchiha Shinichi leaped into the water, lunged forward, and suddenly charged at Uchiha Chi. However, Uchiha Chi, standing blankly in front of the pool, a faint smile played on his lips. Driven by his battle instincts, he immediately sensed a wave of hostility directed towards him. And Uchiha Chi had been waiting for this moment. Without systematic training, Uchiha Chi didn't even know how to dispel Jujutsu illusions, so how could Zero Tail, who knew even less than he did, possibly do so? He had only activated Zero Tail to create the illusion that he could dispel the illusion, forcing Uchiha Shinichi into action. If the opponent harbored hostility towards him, he would fall prey to Uchiha Chi's deception. At this moment, illusion versus deception. Uchiha Chi boldly declared that his was the true illusion, a fleeting illusion. In this world of illusion, Uchiha Chi closed his eyes, ignoring his distorted senses. He lifted his foot, kicked a stone from the ground, and then bit it hard with his mouth. He rolled back, propping himself up against the air with his hands, and launched himself towards the ground. Using his hands as his feet, his mouth as his right hand, his feet as his other hand and waist, and a stone as his Kusanagi sword, he completely distorted the laws of physics. He braced himself against the air, running toward the sky. Then, gritting his teeth, he swung the stone at a white cloud in the sky. He hadn't yet found the true heart's location, but that didn't matter. This was enough. In the real world, as Uchiha Chi in the illusion world closed his eyes and moved on instinct, he stared blankly at the pond. Then, with a flick of his hand, he drew the Kusanagi sword from his waist. He twisted his feet and leaped high, spinning in midair to dodge Uchiha Shinichi's thrust. He pressed his hands against the ground to stop his momentum, then backhanded his blade, charging forward. He kicked the kunai from Uchiha Shinichi's hand, then lashed out with a palm strike, striking his jaw with his wrist. Uchiha Shinichi's head snapped back, and with a scorpion-like kick, he launched him into the air. Immediately, the Uchiha leaped high, following closely, with a whirling, sweeping blow. The longsword ripped through the air. As Uchiha Shinichi stared in astonishment and disbelief, Uchiha Chi reversed his longsword, swinging it with the bladeless side. With a single blow, he felled him to the ground. Dang, you valiantly counterattacked Uchiha Shinichi, who is attempting to piss you in the face. He was already crushed, unable to refute. Your counterattack was powerful, rewarding a critical hit. You gain a random skill from the opponent. Jinjutsu Sharingan requires the Sharingan, which increases in power as your eye power increases. Currently at B, mastered. The skill has critted. Current attribute, Jinjutsu Sharingan, B+, mastered. Your heart steel level has increased. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129 Rain Country Night, Surprise Attack Force. Bang! As Uchiha Shinichi was struck down by a sword, falling flat on his back, the illusion before Uchiha Chi's eyes shattered like a bubble. The tip of the Kusanagi sword now pointed at Uchiha Shinichi's throat, forcing him to stare up at the young man in humiliation. The resentment and shock in his eyes were palpable, and it seemed to be gradually transforming into a complex mix of emotions. Watching this scene, Uchiha Chi suddenly felt as if he were seeing Seiichiro, the man he had defeated. His eyelids twitched, a sense of foreboding. He and Uchiha Shinichi didn't harbor any deep hatred, and he didn't want to be targeted by another Uchiha. With a previous experience of Uchiha Setsuna and Seiichiro as a warning, he still couldn't get over their series of outrageous actions. If another one of them happened, it would be a disaster. Uchiha Chi immediately sheathed his sword with trembling hands, then stretched out a hand, placed it in front of Uchiha Shinichi, scratched his head, and said sincerely, "Senior Shinichi, you are very strong. I almost lost to you. Well, why don't we get up and talk first?" Faced with Uchiha Chi's Sichuan opera face-changing operation that was 20 years ahead of the current version, Uchiha Shinichi didn't react for a moment. He raised his head blankly and looked at him in surprise. After being stunned for a long while, he slapped Uchiha Chi's hand away with a slap in the face, climbed up by himself, and snorted coldly, "HMPH, I actually let you go on purpose. Yes, yes, yes." Seeing this, Uchiha Chi had to turn into a ruthless nodding machine, and then tried to explain, "Well, it's really not that I was late on purpose," and, before Uchiha Chi finished explaining, Uchiha Shinichi interrupted him, closed his eyes and took a deep breath, and said, "Strength is the best pass in Uchiha. You have proved this, and it is enough. This is not your fault. I listened to the slander of the villain and misunderstood you. I will go to Yaoxiu to settle this account." After that, Uchiha Shinichi turned his head and looked at Uchiha Chi seriously with a pair of 3 Magatama Sharingan. "I can see that you know nothing about illusion. As a senior, I will teach you well." At this moment, a noisy sound suddenly sounded outside the dense forest, coming from the direction of the camp. Uchiha Shinichi frowned slightly, then spoke solemnly, "Tonight, there may be a major operation. We will likely be deployed to the battlefield immediately. As matters stand, I will prioritize teaching you some techniques you can immediately put to use." Without further ado, he immediately demonstrated the basics of the Sharingan to Uchiha Chi. Since Uchiha Chi had just mastered the Sharingan Jinjutsu, he was now reviewing these fundamentals from a bird's-eye perspective. Uchiha Chi blinked, surprised to discover he actually understood. Soon, the instruction stretched from noon until dusk. As the clouds in the sky were tinged yellow by the setting sun, 2 new subtitles quietly popped up before Uchiha Chi. "You have mastered Magical Illusion, the Art of the Jagdala, Beginner, B. You have mastered Illusion, Mirror Heaven and Earth Rotation, Beginner, B. 1 is an advanced manipulation of the Sharingan, an offensive Jinjutsu that quickly disables the victim, leaving them feeling as if pinned by 4 iron nails, unable to move freely. The other is a rarer type of rebound Jinjutsu, not a Sharingan eye technique. Mirror Heaven and Earth Rotation, leveraging the Sharingan's ability to instantly see through Jinjutsu, can deflect Jinjutsu cast upon one's opponent. However, this technique requires a high level of proficiency and sharp reflexes, making it extremely difficult to master. According to Uchiha Shinichi, while most of the Tsunagakure ninja excel in wind and earth escape techniques and puppetry, there are also ninja proficient in Jinjutsu. They form small teams and roam the flanks of the battlefield, providing auxiliary harassment. The current Tsunagakure village is unlike the weaker Tsunagakure that will be defunded by the future daimyo of the Wind Country. Its military strength is formidable among the 5 great nations, with a full complement of ninjas. On the battlefield, swords are blind, making it difficult to predict whether they will encounter ninjas with countermeasures to their ninjutsu. It was evening, At the Konoha camp, a sullen, murderous atmosphere permeated the air. As Uchiha Chi and Shinichi entered the camp, a pineapple-haired ninja wearing a genin vest approached them. It was none other than Nara Shikoku, the camp's military advisor. He solemnly handed a list to Uchiha Shinichi, and then solemnly instructed, "Uchiha Shinichi, this is the list and roadmap for tonight's operation. Tonight's operation will be mainly carried out by the undercover reconnaissance team, the special operations team, and the Konoha surprise attack force led by you. In addition, this is a breakthrough operation, which aims to fight quickly, so the logistics and perception troops will not be brought with us. As a means of insurance, the medium-range combat brigade will follow the team in sequence to provide a backup, but don't have too much expectations for this. The content of the mission will be kept confidential throughout the process, and a ninja will explain it after you break into the sand village position." Hearing this, Uchiha Chi looked at Uchiha Shinichi beside him with a little surprise. He didn't expect that he, a senior in the clan, would take on such a big responsibility on the battlefield of the Rain Country and be appointed as the captain of the Konoha surprise attack force. At that moment, Uchiha Shinichi frowned, raised his head, and asked, "Special Operations Team, what's that? I've never heard of this team before, Nara Shikoku. You'd better give me a reasonable explanation, otherwise I will never lead my troops on such a ridiculous mission." While the Uchiha was a bit blunt, he was no fool. Nara Shikoku's words were a bit formal, and in layman's terms, they meant, sending Uchiha Shinichi's surprise attack force as the vanguard, carrying out the dangerous mission of invading behind enemy lines, and without any support, is like deliberately sending them to their deaths. Nara Shikoku remained silent despite this rebuke. He simply patted Uchiha Shinichi's shoulder calmly and spoke. The entire operations strategy was formulated by Lord Orochimaru. The Special Operations Team is also led by Lord Orochimaru himself, the Sannin. It's composed of elite Anbu members, and is tasked with a more important and dangerous mission. Even if you don't believe me, please trust Lord Orochimaru." And Nara Shikoku glanced at the bewildered Uchiha Chi, his eyes flickering with a hint of wonder. He shook his head, not finishing his words, and turned away. Uchiha Shinichi was silent for a moment, unfolding the list and the map in his hand to carefully examine them. After a moment, he clenched the list in his hand and sighed deeply. As the highest-ranking Sannin at the border camp, Orochimaru had personally led the team and led the charge. He had no reason to object. But after looking at the list in his hand, he turned and faced Uchiha Chi in silence, feeling a sense of difficulty in finding the words. Uchiha Chi also sensed something was amiss, raised an eyebrow, and asked, "Shinichi-senpai, is my name on it?" Uchiha Shinichi let out a deep breath and said silently, "I'm sorry, your name and Shisui's are both on it. I'll go find Lord Orochimaru and have him cancel your mission." Without waiting for Uchiha Chi to speak, Uchiha Shinichi turned and stormed towards the main tent in the center of the camp. Uchiha Chi was the only one left on the camp street. He shook his head. It would be pointless for Uchiha Shinichi to go find Orochimaru. This was a long-established strategy, unlikely to change just because of him. Furthermore, Orochimaru had made it clear earlier, he would have Uchiha Chi take to the battlefield to confront powerful enemies. This mission was likely Uchiha Chi's first war mission. Uchiha Chi looked around. Every ninja on the street wore a solemn expression. Some were packing their belongings, some were adjusting their posture, and some were even crouching over wooden boxes, writing their last letters with brushes. The entire camp seemed shrouded in a gloomy cloud, and everyone's expression was heavy. He frowned slightly. This was clearly not normal. Uchiha Chi had learned some basic knowledge of ninja warfare within his clan. Normally, during the Ninja World War, Konoha would divide its forces according to the abilities of various ninja. Ninjas with strong offensive capabilities like the Uchiha clan would be assigned to the surprise attack force, the vanguard. In addition, there were the intelligence unit, the Yamanaka clan, the infiltration and reconnaissance unit, the Ruden Anbu, the medium-range unit, specializing in concealed weapons and weapons, the close combat unit, various cannon fodder, the combat close to medium-range unit, the main combat unit, including various elite ninja, the medical and logistics unit, ninja trainees, medical ninja, and sealing ninja, and the perception unit, the Hyuga clan, perception ninja. Right now, not far from Uchiha Chi, a member of the Sarutobi clan, taking deep breaths in front of a tent, seemed to be assigned to the close to medium-range combat unit and not participating in this mission. Yet, he was clearly concentrating his energy for battle. So, what was he preparing for? What notice had he received? And which side of the battlefield would he be assigned to? Besides the missions tonight for Uchiha Chi's surprise attack unit and Orochimaru's special operations team, were there any other operations planned? Uchiha Chi knew nothing, and no root ninja had come to him. It was as if Ryoma Aburim had deliberately forgotten the mission he'd mentioned earlier, about taking on a large battalion of 100 men. So, what was going on that he didn't know about? At that moment, a sudden, muffled voice awoke Uchiha Chi to his senses. Uchiha Chi, now, report to the surprise attack force at the center of the camp. Take your proper position. Your position is in the first row, position 16. As the voice rang out, the sky suddenly lit up with a pale flash of lightning. Boom! Thunder roared, and the clouds descended. A dull, dark cloud swirled and surged, as if the entire sky had transformed into a devouring demonic face, ready to swallow Uchiha Chi whole. Then, a fine, needle-like rain fell, slamming against a tent with a dull, thud 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 thud. Uchiha Chi took a deep breath, clearing his mind of distracting thoughts. He gripped the hilt of the Kusanagi sword and, with a determined gaze, walked towards the center of the camp. A fierce battle begins tonight. Chapter 130. The situation suddenly changed. Don't come over. In the central square of the Konoha camp, bonfires stood on four sides of the platform, blazing brightly, sending up sparks and crackling charcoal. They illuminated the solemn face of Nara Shikoku on the stage, and the expressions of the rows of ninja below, ranging from fear to calmness to burning desire. Uchiha Chi stood in the first row in front of the platform, the 16th. The first row consisted of 15 ninjas wearing genin vests. He, a chunin in a high-collared black robe, stood at the end, looking somewhat out of place. But no one paid attention to such matters at the moment. Everyone waited with their heads held high for Nara Shikoku's mission briefing on the stage. Uchiha Shinichi stood beside him. Behind him, in the second row, stood Uchiha Shisui, his face solemn, his eyes quietly lighting up with his two Magatama Sharingan. Uchiha Chi noticed another Uchiha who had set out for the Rain Country battlefield alongside Uchiha Shisui and Shinichi. Special Jonin Uchiha Suke, whose presence was no longer visible. Looking at the two Magatama in Uchiha Shisui's eyes, Uchiha Chi fell silent for a moment, sighing softly. The answer was obvious. Then, after a period of silence, Nara Shikoku raised his hand, glanced at his pocket watch, and after checking the time, he stepped forward, glanced at the audience, and spoke calmly. Ladies and gentlemen, due to some unforeseen circumstances, I will be conducting the mission briefing on behalf of Master Jiraiya. Tonight, we will launch the surprise attack ahead of schedule. The entire operation is planned in 3 parts. First, the close combat brigade and the close quarters detachments will conduct a frontal containment operation, luring the enemy away and clearing a path for the surprise attack force. Second, the surprise attack force will penetrate the land of Rain vertically, penetrating deep behind enemy lines. Third, to prevent intelligence leaks, upon arrival at the target location, each unit will remain on standby, awaiting orders from the contact person. Specific tasks for each unit have been assigned to the captains. The above is, the captains will give detailed mission instructions on the way. There is no time to lose, let's set off now. As soon as the words fell, the 15 jonin in the first row simultaneously turned to face the ninja behind them, gestured to their subordinates, and quickly led their men away. This scene left all the ninja present confused. Nara Shikoku's mission statement was too general. Before a normal ninja battle, detailed instructions on defense positions and attack directions would be given. But this scene was like accepting a mission from a ninja village for a small-scale secret combat mission. Fortunately, the ninja present were familiar with this format and quickly took their positions. Uchiha Shinichi also reacted quickly. He patted Uchiha Chi's shoulder and gestured for him to follow. Under his leadership, Uchiha Chi quickly followed him out of the camp. Following closely behind was the entire surprise attack force. It was composed of 90 people, with 3 people in a squad and 30 people in a company. Uchiha Shinichi was the team's captain. After the mission was issued, the entire force quickly left the camp and crossed the border of the Rain Country, following the sound of the mighty Konoha army advancing on the other side. Taking advantage of the night, this surprise attack force silently transformed into a series of dark shadows, led by Uchiha Shinichi, quickly rushed to the flank of Konoha's Tsunagakure main battlefield in the Land of Rain. Uchiha Chi had expected them to follow Nara Shikoku's instructions when assigning tasks, waiting for the forces on the front lines to distract the main force before their forces could set off. However, Uchiha Shinichi didn't hesitate, leading his troops straight ahead from the flank. In 2 hours, they quietly crossed a ravine, crossed a pre-planned cave, climbed a high mountain, crossed a canyon suspension bridge, and descended from the cliff face. Then, surprisingly, they arrived at the rear of the Tsunagakure camp, a desolate desert. Behind them, they could see the bright lights of a Tsunagakure camp not far away, and even a few shinobi standing guard, yawning. Ahead, they could see the desert of the Land of Wind, with yellow sand filing the sky and a sharp wind. Is it strange? Uchiha Shinichi leaned against a rock in the Gobi Desert, sneered, and asked Uchiha C who was beside him with a look of astonishment. Actually, I feel strange too, but now I almost understand what happened. Uchiha C's face twitched slightly, and he frowned and asked, Senior Shinichi, don't keep us in suspense. What exactly happened? Why did we pass through the Sand Village camp so easily and come behind them? Uchiha Shinichi was silent for a moment, then raised his hand and gestured. Soon, Uchiha Shisui and the other 2 captains of the surprise attack force came over. The 5 of them formed a circle. Uchiha Shinichi spread out the mission scroll, and then said solemnly, I know you are all confused, so now let's start the real mission description. Then, he pointed to the map on the scroll, and said to everyone in a heavy voice, First of all, for this operation, please understand one thing: we are not a real surprise attack force. Our duty is to act as bait. Narashikaku used a large force to tie down the enemy's main force so that the real surprise attack force could confuse the enemy's side and mislead the Tsunagakure, and the path we took was another secret path discovered by Master Jiraiya. Upon hearing this, Uchiha Shisui was stunned and couldn't help asking, but why do you do this? Uchiha Shinichi frowned slightly. This is a bit complicated. Originally, our mission was to cooperate with the elite Anbu to carry out a material destruction operation tomorrow. But because one person arrived early, the mission was upgraded. Uchiha C raised his eyebrows, and thought of a possibility, and his heart couldn't help but tremble slightly. Then, he turned his head to look at Uchiha Shinichi, and saw that the other party uttered the name in a deep voice, the 4th Kazakage, Raza. What? The 2 squadron leaders on the side were startled and asked in astonishment, Captain, are you confused? The 4th Kazakage has just taken office. How come he came to the battlefield immediately? Uchiha Shinichi shook his head and said speechlessly, You ask me, who should I ask? Hearing this, Uchiha C's heart sank slightly. Because of him, your king of the Sand Village did not die, and Luo Xiao is now in a situation where he was forced to do something. In order to thoroughly solidify the position of the 4th Kazakage, he urgently needed military merits, which is why he rushed to the battlefield of the Rain Country a few days after he took office. To put it bluntly, this guy still wanted to gain military merits. And because the intelligence came suddenly, and the plan to assassinate Luo Xiao had already been made, and now they had seized the opportunity that the other party was alone, and they didn't have to go to the more dangerous land of Earth, then Konoha would have to instigate Jiraiya and Orochimaru, who happened to be here, to do this? Uchiha Shinichi exhaled heavily and said solemnly, In short, this is what happened. The situation on the entire battlefield is very complicated now, and it is difficult to say how it will develop in the end, but this time, it is obvious that we have to conduct a 3-way battle. First, the original operation to destroy supplies must continue. This task is to be completed by the joint efforts of us and the infiltrated reconnaissance team. We are responsible for containing the Sand Village in this camp on the border, delaying time for the elite Anbu who have infiltrated the reconnaissance team, and destroying supplies. Secondly, the diversionary operations on the front battlefield will hold back the main force of the Sand Village and create conditions for the real surprise attack force. Finally, the surprise attack force will launch a real surprise attack to assassinate the 4th Kazakage, Raza, who has come from the Sand Village. After Uchiha Shinichi described the general situation of the entire battlefield, everyone present's eyelids jumped. Assassinating the 4th Kazakage, Raza? Just by listening to it, one can imagine the importance of this operation. And Uchiha C was also stunned, thinking that this is not right. Isn't this his buddy's mission? This made him have an absurd illusion that his mission was snatched away, and immediately asked anxiously, Wait, Senior Shinichi, assassinating the Kazakage, who is going to do the assassination? Uchiha Shinichi couldn't help laughing, glanced at the expression on Uchiha C's face, and chuckled, Could it be you? It must be Lord Orochimaru, Lord Jiraiya and his disciples who will complete this task. The special operations team composed of them is the real surprise attack force this time. Uchiha C's heart skipped a beat. It felt like he had lost something in an instant. How terrifying would an assassination team composed of Orochimaru, Jiraiya and Namokaze Minato be? Would Luosha still be able to survive? Uchiha Chi's face twisted slightly, and he didn't know how to comment for a moment. At this time, Uchiha Shinichi put away the smile on his face sank, and he said to everyone in a serious tone, "We can't predict what the situation is on the other two sides. At this moment, we can only do what we should do. Besides, our mission here is also extremely dangerous." He pointed to the Sands village camp opposite, and said with a somewhat ugly expression, "In a while, a member of the Anbu will come and inform us of the time tract. Now, all I know is there are 300 Sand village ninjas there. The number of upper, middle and lower ninjas cannot be predicted, and we only have 90 people here, only 3 upper ninjas. If we can't hold them here until the mission is completed, or the elite Anbu who are carrying out the operation to destroy the supplies fail," Uchiha Shinichi's face twisted, and he said solemnly, "We all have to die." After saying this, Uchiha Shinichi let out a deep breath, waved his hand, and signaled the 2 squadron leaders to retreat first. When only Uchiha Shisui and Uchiha Chi were left around, he gritted his teeth slightly, a trace of struggle appeared in his eyes, and then turned around and slapped Uchiha Chi's shoulder heavily, and said solemnly, "See, you will follow me later and act together with my team. Now, you are the bridge between our clan and the village. Let me put it bluntly, it doesn't matter if everyone else here dies, because they have no blood relationship with us." Uchiha Shinichi looked at Uchiha Chi solemnly, and said in a deep voice, "But only you can't. As long as you are here, the family and the village will one day be able to reach a reconciliation, and this is the long-cherished wish of our faction. Although you have a certain level of strength now, you have not yet fully grown, so, it is better to leave the dangerous missions to the seniors." Upon hearing this, Shisui, who was standing by, nodded. His eyes were determined, as if he had made a decision. He raised his little face and said firmly to Uchiha Chi, "Don't worry, see, Brother Shinichi and I will protect you, even if it costs our lives. I will not hesitate." Hearing this, Uchiha Chi couldn't help but tremble, and looked at the 2 people with horror. The change was too fast. What was going on? In one night, 2 missions were snatched away one after another, and how come 2 seriously ill Uchiha suddenly said they would protect me? Am I in the land of rain or the land of hot water? Chapter 131 When Konoha Burns. While the skies of the land of fire were shrouded in dark clouds and rain was pouring down, the skies of the neighboring land of rain, once again, cleared up. A sky filled with stars hung low in the sky, the palpable starry sky seeming to make one forget the day's troubles. A bright moon shone brightly across the earth, casting a veil of moonlight over the coarse sand, gravel, and wine-sculpted rock pillars of the Gobi Desert. The night wind blew hard and cold, leaving Uchiha Chi's face dry and slightly uneasy. Before him, the solemn and resolute gazes of Shinichi and Shisui left him feeling a bit dazed. Soon, Uchiha Shinichi's eyes darkened, and he pulled a kunai from the bag of ninja tools on his back, clutching it in his hand. With a sinister gaze, he gazed towards the Sands village camp, not far behind the rock pillar, and said in a deep voice, "Uchiha Chi, remember, the elite Anbu scouting and assassination forces are 10 miles due west of us. In a moment, they will fire flares. There are 4 signal colors, red, yellow, green, and blue, each representing a different meaning. Green means they've begun action, blue means mission accomplished, both sides must retreat immediately. Yellow means the mission has encountered difficulties, requiring us to delay for at least a while." Uchiha Chi raised his head, his eyes flickering. "What about red?" Uchiha Shinichi let out a heavy breath. "You'd better hope we don't encounter that." A suffocating silence descended, and no one spoke. Not long after, a ninja suddenly stood up and shouted from behind the 3 of them, "Captain, west!" The 3 Uchiha had turned their heads and saw, at the end of their sight, a green cloud rising high from the western border of the wind country. "Brother Shinichi, what should we do?" Uchiha Shisui suddenly stood up, drew his wakizashi from his back, and flashed his sharingan, his eyes filled with sternness. "Wait!" Uchiha Shinichi's breath quickened, his grip on the kunai gripped tightly. "On the battlefield, Narashikaku is trustworthy for now. The ninja who ordered the operation hasn't appeared yet." Wait a little longer. Before Shinichi could finish his words, a ninja from the squad behind him stood up and pointed in the direction of the Sand village camp, calling out urgently, "Captain, look over there." The Sand village camp. Everyone looked in that direction. Shortly after the green smoke rose, a dense mass of ninja suddenly emerged from the direction of the Sand village camp. It was practically an outpouring. The Sand Village ninjas charged at full speed, their toes lifting rough stones from the Gobi Desert, sending clouds of dust rising over 5 meters high. The charge, forming a formation, was a terrifying display of power. Then, they charged directly towards the position of their surprise attack force. 50, 100, 200, over 300, there are 8 ninjas in genin attire, brother Shinichi, something's wrong. Uchiha Shisui stared intently at the other side with his Sharingan wide open, his gaze trembling slightly. This group didn't rush to the Wind Country border to reinforce them. Their target, it's us. Our tracks were exposed from the very beginning. Uchiha Shinichi gasped at the words, his expression instantly frozen. This, before he could react, a ninja watching from behind, eyes agape, shouted in shock, Captain, look behind you. Uchiha Shinichi whipped his head around, pupils trembling. Behind him, at the Wind Country border, a red cloud followed a green cloud rising up. The relentless wind blew the red cloud incessantly, like the scythe of the Grim Reaper swinging. Thinking of the meaning of the scene before his eyes, Uchiha Shinichi felt his lips dry, and he swallowed hard. His throat was so tight that he couldn't swallow any more. Facing this scene, with an extremely dangerous and terrifying situation erupting simultaneously from both sides, the faces of the ninja present were stunned, their eyes filled with fear. Unlike Uchiha Chi, they understood the meaning of the smoke very clearly. It represented a single order, fight to the last moment. Until death. Uchiha Chi watched this scene, his eyes widening slightly, his heart sinking. Combining Uchiha Shinichi's words with the intelligence he knew, the elite Anbu officer who was destroying the poison in the tempering device 10 miles away must be his superior, Aburame Ryoma. Aburame Ryoma was a highly skilled genin who could even withstand a few blows from the future 4th Mizukage, Yagura. What was happening over there? What did the red smoke signify? Could it be that Aburame Ryoma, the reserved man who had saved his life, was in some mortal danger? A tangled web of thoughts tangled together, weighing heavily on Uchiha Chi's heart. But now, there was only one thing he could do. Uchiha Chi took a deep breath, bent his knees slightly, and raised his hand to grasp the Kusanagi sword. His gaze fixed on the 300 sand villages across from him. As he looked up, a pair of crimson double Magatama Sharingans lit up. However, at this moment, a hand reached out and pressed on Uchiha Chi's wrist. Uchiha Shinichi stared at Uchiha Chi with a pair of 3 Magatama Sharingan. He was breathing rapidly and looked very nervous. However, his tone was as firm as tempered steel. See, believe me, believe in us. His eyes were slightly red and his face was trembling. Because of this war, I have lost a member of my clan. A close friend. And countless colleagues. I can't lose the dream that I must fulfill until my death. A little brat like you should stay in the back, stay in the village, suck on your pacifier and practice martial arts honestly, and eventually grow into a towering tree. Do you understand? After the words fell, Uchiha Shinichi stood up suddenly. Facing the 89 members of the Konoha surprise attack force behind him, he raised his kune, his eyes wide open, and shouted angrily, everyone, the plan has changed. The ninja arranged by the top didn't show up, our intelligence has been exposed, the mission has failed, and now, we are faced with only one way, death and battle. I know you are all scared. And I am scared too, but what I want to say is, there are 2 children in this team. One is 12 years old, and the other is 7 years old. Their lives should not end here. What a bullshit mission. From now on, screw them all. I will lead the charge, carve out a way for them to survive. Just like what the 3rd Hokage says every year when they enter the ninja school where Konoha dances, fire will also continue. The flames will continue to illuminate this village and make new leaves sprout. Now is the time for me to burn completely. Uchiha Shinichi turned his back, staring at the 300 sands village opposite with wide eyes, strode forward, and shouted without looking back, if you want to escape, do it now. I will save even deserters. As soon as the words fell, the panicked surprise attack troops suddenly quieted down. The ninjas couldn't help but look up, their gaze fixed on the trembling man standing alone against the 300 Tsunagakure. Their captain, Uchiha Shinichi. A sneer echoed. It was the captain of the surprise attack force's 2nd squadron, a civilian genin named Ichiji. Shinichi, stop trying to be a hero, you've never even beaten me at cards, how could I possibly let you win at this point? He trembled as he rose to his feet, positioned himself behind Uchiha Shinichi, his sword unsheathed, his gaze fixed. The next moment, Uchiha Chi suddenly looked up, and saw that with Ichiji's advance, All 30 members of the second squadron had risen to their feet. With expressions of determination and fear on their faces, they stepped past him and stood firmly behind Uchiha Shinichi. Then, another man stepped forward, carrying his dog. Silent and unsmiling, he marched forward with swift, decisive action, shouting, "Captain of the 3rd Squadron, Uchiha Chi. Report." 30 more men rose to their feet. Uchiha Shisui, caught sight of the scene, was tempted to rise and do the same, as he was the captain of the 1st Squadron. But a young man covered his mouth and said, with a smile, "I, the vice-captain of the 1st Squadron, Yamano Tuma, will handle this." With that, 29 men stood up. A full 89, passing Uchiha Chi and Uchiha Shisui, stood before them, their stunned gazes forming a thick wall. Uchiha Chi stared blankly at the scene, and for some reason, a sudden pang of irritation hit his nose. This group of people had nothing to do with him, they had never even met before. Yet, they had stood up simply for the will of fire that Uchiha Shinichi had called out, for 2 children from the same village who had met by chance, for a trivial reason in a dream. Hearing the commotion behind him, Uchiha Shinichi couldn't help but tilt his head. When he saw the group of people following closely behind him, surprise filled his eyes, and a smile curled up at the corner of his mouth. Soon, Uchiha Shinichi turned his head, his eyes widening. He stared intently at the 300 men of Sans village swooping down with such force, his blood-red 3-Magatama Sharingan rapidly spinning, and the kunai in his palm swirled into dazzling blade flower. Then, Uchiha Shinichi grasped the kunai and shouted angrily, "Konoha's surprise attack force, assemble, fight for the will of fire. Kill." Chapter 132. Are you ready to become a legend in the ninja world? The 89 Konoha surprise attack force stood ready. Their lineup consisted of 3 Jonin, 24 Chunin, and 62 Genin. Opposing them stood the 300 Tsunagakure forces, 8 visible Jonin alone, and countless other Chunin and Genin. Some wielded puppets, some wielded ninja tools, some formed hand seals preparing wind and earth jutsu, some flanked to unleash supporting ninjutsu and illusions, and some held back to unleash a series of ninjutsu attacks. 300 men rushed forward, a chaotic yet orderly force, like a dark cloud bearing down upon them. Uchiha Shinichi swallowed and, without turning back, continued shouting, "See, Shisui, don't go back the way you came, this is behind Tsunagakure. From here, heading southeast, we can go south to the valley country," and then, Shinichi hadn't finished explaining his rough retreat plan en route when, out of nowhere, a ninja dressed in Anbu attire and a bird-patterned mask suddenly leaped from a rock pillar in front of the 89-man Konoha surprise force. He raised his hand, suddenly drawing the long sword from his waist, and pointed it at Uchiha Shinichi's face, coldly scolding, "Uchiha Shinichi, captain of the Konoha surprise force, are you planning to betray the village?" This sudden and startling scene made Uchiha Shinichi swallow the words in his throat. He frowned, staring at the Anbu ninja in astonishment. "Are you the messenger ninja arranged by Nara Shikoku, an Anbu?" Uchiha Shinichi frowned, his eyes narrowed slightly, and fell on the other's bird-head red-patterned mask. "No, you smell like a sewer rat. You are that man's subordinate, a root." The root ninja wearing the bird-head patterned mask had a calm and indifferent look. "Uchiha Shinichi, I will report your actions to my superiors later, but, now, the time has come, obey the strategic instructions and fight immediately." The root ninja's eyes turned cold, and he looked at Uchiha Shinichi coldly. "Otherwise, you will be immediately regarded as a traitor to the village." Hearing this, Uchiha Shinichi's forward veins jumped, and he tried hard to suppress the anger that was about to burst out. He asked in a deep voice, "You have been here from the beginning, you knew this was all a trap, why didn't you tell us the content of the operation?" He pointed at the sand village that would rush in front of him in a few minutes at most, gritted his teeth, and pointed at the red smoke behind his forehead. "You have to wait until everything is over before jumping out. Are you showing off your power? Fuck your mission. The current situation is that you just want us to pay with our lives to stop these sand ninja, then, help you sneak into the reconnaissance unit and complete the mission." Uchiha Shinichi bared his teeth and roared, "You want to take my life, the lives of my people, the lives of my colleagues, and the lives of all the ninjas here? Come and complete the achievements of your route." As soon as the words fell, Uchiha Shinichi and all the people behind him, a full 90 eyes fell on the root ninja, the anger in their eyes almost to tear him into pieces. However, in the face of such questioning, the root ninja suddenly raised his head and laughed. Under the eye holes of the mask, a pair of eyes full of sarcasm glanced at Uchiha Shinichi and his surprise attack force with disdain. Then, the root ninja asked with a sneer, "Uchiha Shinichi, who do you think you are?" He snorted coldly, raised his hand and took out a scroll from the scroll bag on his waist, unfolded it and showed it in front of Uchiha Shinichi, then shouted coldly, "Look carefully, this is your mission." He pointed to the contents on the scroll and simply read it out loud. Konoha Surprise Attack Force, all members stay on standby. The battle here, the mission here, will be completed by the members of the Konoha Special Operations Team who are about to arrive. You are not allowed to interfere before the members of the Special Operations Team are dead, otherwise, it will be regarded as treason. The root ninja sneered and threw the scroll into the hands of Uchiha Shinichi, who was stunned for a moment. Uchiha Shinichi's eyes widened immediately, and he repeatedly checked the contents of the scroll. After confirming that there were seals from the three ninjas, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and the Konoha border camp, he looked up in disbelief. "What did you say? Special Operations Team? Where are the members of the Special Operations Team here? Aren't they going to assassinate the fourth Kazekage Raza?" Uchiha Shinichi gritted his teeth, raised his head and glanced at the Sand Village who were rushing towards them, and couldn't help but ask anxiously, "Can you tell me where the key figure is now?" The root ninja immediately sneered and shook his head, and replied coldly, "You have no right to know the secrets of the root. Just wait." Uchiha Shinichi immediately clenched his fists, pointing at the Sand Village ninja who was getting closer and closer and making more and more noises. His face began to tremble. "If we don't make preparations, if we don't go up, we won't be able to stop them. Now, you actually let us wait to die here, just to wait for a member of a mysterious Special Operations Team whose whereabouts are unknown." Uchiha Shinichi grabbed the root ninja by the collar, his eyes bloodshot as he roared, "Are you kidding me?" The root ninja slapped his hand away, snorted, and scoffed, "That's not your concern. On the battlefield, all you need to do is follow orders." With these words, the root ninja turned and calmly observed the approaching Tsunagakure ninja force. As the Tsunagakure ninjas drew closer, the ground rumbled with footsteps, like the beating of a drum by a god. The wind howled, rocks and earth avalanched, and dust flew. The ninja force's charge was so deafening it resembled a row of full-ton dump trucks bearing down on them. Watching this scene, Uchiha Shinichi and his surprise attack force all paled. Even the cold wind couldn't stifle the sweat that streamed down their cheeks. Unmindful of the root ninja's orders, they immediately took up their positions, fully alert and ready for battle. 3 kilometers, 2 kilometers, 1 kilometer, until the faces of the Tsunagakure vanguard could almost be seen. The root ninja, who had been watching with indifference, finally turned around and gazed indifferently at the wall of surprise attack troops behind him. Then, he shouted coldly, "Get out of the way." At these words, the surprise attack troops glared back again. 2nd Squadron Captain Ichiji was so angry that his teeth were gnashing. He quietly approached Uchiha Shinichi and whispered, "Captain, this bastard is so arrogant. How about we kill him?" Nearby, Inuzuka Akachi nodded grimly and said startlingly, "Just kill him, wolf, now." Even the dog at his feet nodded in agreement. Uchiha Shinichi let out a deep breath and glanced at the root ninja with a cold look. "Let him pass. Everyone, prepare for battle." With the captain's order, the others reluctantly made way for the root ninja to pass from beginning to end. Uchiha Shinichi shook his head. This time, he definitely couldn't rely on his grandson anymore. He had to rely on him. Without even turning around, he began laying out his tactics. "Mingai, 3rd Squadron, focus on diversion. Ichiji, follow me and carve a path through the enemy lines. I'll use my most powerful fire style combined with your wind style." However, before he could finish his words, he heard a sudden uproar behind him. Hiss! Uchiha Shinichi was surprised. He thought, the Tsunagakure's about to hit me in the face. "What the hell are you yelling about?" He turned away, about to curse and tell his men to calm down. But when he saw what was happening before him, Uchiha Shinichi swallowed his words, looked over in surprise, and gasped. At that moment, the root ninja wearing a bird-headed, red-patterned mask crossed the narrow path cleared by the crowd and walked directly before Uchiha Chi. Then, without a word, this root ninja, who had been so arrogant just moments before, treating everyone as if they owed him 2 million, half-knelt before the bewildered youth. He held out a mission scroll with both hands. Uchiha Chi blinked, took the scroll from the other's hand, and unfolded it. Inside, Orochimaru's handwriting was written in 2 large characters, "Do as you wish, and come back alive." The half-kneeling root ninja raised his head slightly and gazed up at Uchiha Chi, as if he were looking at a blazing sun illuminating all things. He had witnessed Uchiha Chi's immense power in the land of hot water with a Buran Ryoma. His gaze was filled with fanaticism. Then, the root ninja bowed his head solemnly, then raised his voice and asked, "Besides that, Uchiha Chi, Lord Orochimaru asked me to ask you one more thing. Are you ready to become a legend in the ninja world?" As soon as he finished speaking, everyone's eyes turned to the young man, their expressions filled with surprise, astonishment, and confusion. Uchiha Chi simply stared at the scroll, then raised his head to gaze at the approaching Sans village army, the Konoha surprise attack force right before his eyes, and the red smoke curling up in his peripheral vision. He closed his eyes and shut the scroll. Orochimaru was telling him, the series of events, the various dire situations, were all realities, a strategic exchange. To create an opportunity for a surprise attack, a chance to quickly end the war, this unit would be discarded as a pawn. However, he was just an extra, a casual addition thrown in by Orochimaru. If he couldn't defeat this Sans village army, then those around him would perish. If he couldn't quickly rescue Buran Ryoma, then his superior, who had been so kind to him, might also die. Uchiha Chi was silent for a moment, his heart sinking slightly. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes, a pair of scarlet pupils that lit up without any hesitation. He took a deep breath, casually dropped the scroll, and glanced down at the root ninja at his feet. He stepped forward, slowly forming hand seals with his hands. Then, without turning back, Uchiha Chi calmly said, "Then you will watch carefully, my full strength." Upon hearing this reply, the root ninja bowed deeply, placed his hand on his chest, and whispered respectfully, "Then, I wish you good luck in your military career." The fanatical gaze beneath the mask concealed the answer to the mystery only he knew, and the madness that was about to be revealed. Chapter 133 What? He is a member of the special team. The full moon's clear light bathed the earth. A howling wind from the land of wind whipped up the coarse gravel and rocks, sending them dancing wildly through the air. The assault force, split in two, was under everyone's gaze. A young man in a high-collared black Uchiha robe calmly advanced, stepping over kneeling root ninjas offering their blessings. He made his way through the crowd, their gazes swirling. He brushed past the startled captain of the assault force, Uchiha Shinichi. Then, standing alone, he stood before the 90 men. "Wait, Uchiha Chi, what are you doing? Don't go any further." Uchiha Shinichi, his eyes widening at the scene, leaped forward, ready to grab the young man's arm and pull him back. Come back. Come back now, this isn't some bravado." Then, a fierce wind rose, its whimpering wind mingling with the clamor of battle, swirling through the air. The young man took another step forward, dodging Uchiha Shinichi's grasp, then paused. His tone was calm, as if he had understood everything. Without turning back, he softly replied, "Shinichi-senpai, I want to save you, I want to save many people." Then, Uchiha Chi tilted his head slightly, looking back at Uchiha Shinichi with a half face. In this half of his face, a single Sharingan, like a copper bell, was open, its white densely tangled with countless bloodshot veins. Its single eye was blazing red, like a demon. Staring at that crimson eye, Uchiha Shinichi suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. His breathing suddenly became labored, as if the air around him had been sucked out of him by the sight. A tremendous fear seemed to be brewing. A Jinjutsu, the Sharingan. Uchiha Shinichi instantly realized he had been caught in a Jinjutsu. And a Jinjutsu of immense sophistication, even more advanced than his own. But how could this be possible? How could this young man have mastered the Sharingan illusion technique, a technique renowned even among the Uchiha clan, in just a few hours? And even taken it to the next level. Using 2 Magatama, he forcibly controlled 3 Magatama. It was so fast that he couldn't even unleash the mirror heaven and earth rotation. This was simply unbelievable. Uchiha Shinichi gasped in shock, staring at the young man in astonishment. In this distorted world of illusion, the young man's expression was grim, heavy as if he were carrying a mountain. His lips, teeth, and even his face were trembling. Then, with his single eye wide open, he stared at him dimly and said calmly, "Carry the righteousness, carry the dream, and save despair." Uchiha Chi trembled as he hugged Si Yin, and said with a desperate smile, "Sorry, I have no room left for myself. If you want to blame someone, blame yourselves." Uchiha Shinichi's heart skipped a beat, and he felt something was wrong for some reason. He swallowed suddenly and stared blankly at the young man in front of him. He immediately struggled desperately, opened his eyes wide, and asked anxiously, "You? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Are you kidding me? Who wants you to save me? Uchiha Chi, get back here." Uchiha Chi shook his head and turned his head calmly. His expression turned into indifference, as if the shameful and cowardly expression just now was only a flash in the pan, and then he said lightly, "Senior Shinichi, after returning to the village, please help me burn some paper in front of my memorial tablet." Then he formed a final seal and calmly turned. A faint red chakra lingered from his palm. Immediately, his 5 fingers touched the ground. On the desolate Gobi Desert, on the coarse sand and gravel, before the 300 sand villagers screaming and shouting behind him, he slammed the ground hard. Super Death Battle Barrier. A circular cipher spell rapidly expanded, a pale red light shield separating the 90 Konoha surprise attack troops in front of him, locking onto the 300 sand villagers behind him, and suddenly illuminated. At this moment, the field unfolded. The vast death battle arena once again took center stage in the ninja world. Uchiha Chi stood up, looked at the crowd before him, and smiled. Then, with a gentle wave of his hand, he silently opened his mouth and uttered a series of words, "Farewell." With that, the young man turned his head without hesitation and walked forward. You, Uchiha Shinichi gritted his teeth, his Sharingan darting wildly. As he watched the scene unfold before him, his heart ached with intense emotion, threatening to burst through his chest. Wait, Uchiha Chi, you're courting death, let me go, please, come back." Amidst a surge of intense emotion, he finally broke free from the illusion's control and lunged forward, hammering his fist into the barrier. However, this powerful punch only created a ripple within the barrier, unable to even shake it. His expression froze in a daze as he stared blankly at the figure of the young man walking alone towards the 300 sands village within the barrier. His eyes widened, bulging with bloodshot, His 3 Magatama Sharingan darted wildly, darting again and again. Uchiha Chi, he actually wanted to fight the 300 sands village alone? This scene clearly exceeded everyone's expectations. The entire Konoha surprise attack force stared in shock at the young man's back within the barrier, their hearts trembling. Watching this scene, Uchiha Shinichi gasped for air. He whipped his head around, grabbing the man behind him like a madman, and spoke desperately, Ichiji, with your wind style team, combined with my fire style, we can do this, and Mingai, your Utongaya is also very powerful. Help me break this barrier. I want to break it. I want to save that child. Uchiha Shinichi pleaded frantically, his face filled with urgency. He didn't know why he had gone to such lengths, but the scene before him, and the young man's actions, had completely broken his defenses. His mind went blank, leaving only this thought. However, at this moment, the root with a red patterned bird head mask suddenly appeared in front of them, drew out his long sword, put it on Uchiha Shinichi's neck, and shouted indifferently, "Stop, if you move one more step, your behavior will be immediately regarded as treason." "What did you say?" Uchiha Shinichi turned around abruptly, put his neck against the blade and glared at the root ninja. "Do you want us to watch a child die?" "Humph," the root ninja sneered and was too lazy to explain, but the next moment, a wakizashi was suddenly pulled out, drawing a beautiful arc, and hit the root ninja's vest at a speed that was completely unobservable to the naked eye. Behind the root ninja, Uchiha Shisui, eyes wide open and tears of blood streaming, spoke hoarsely and coldly. "You'd better give me an explanation, otherwise, I'll kill you." Hearing this childish voice, the root ninja turned abruptly to see Uchiha Shisui, tears of blood streaming from his right eye, staring at him with apathy and coldness. Within his right eye, the pitch-black 2 Magatama had unknowingly grown into 3. Stared at by this cold, sinister eye, the root ninja shuddered for no apparent reason. He frowned, sheathed his sword, and calmly raised his head, gazing at the youth's back within the barrier. He took a deep breath, then said in a deep voice, "You are wrong, he is no mere child." The root ninja raised his head with a feverish gaze and shouted, "He is the beloved disciple of the legendary Sannin, Konoha's secret weapon, one who understands the will of the root and has emerged from the darkness, the reincarnation of Shiro, and the important person who carried out this mission, a core member of the Konoha Special Operations Team, Uchiha Chi." Hearing the words of the root ninja, everyone present's eyelids jumped, and they looked at the young man in horror. "What, he is a member of that special team?" The root ninja just snorted coldly, not bothering to pay attention to this group of ignorant people. He stared at Uchiha's back with his eyes, and his eyes were in a trance, as if he had returned to the city buried by the ocean and stood on the ruins again, just like now, behind this young man who was like the sun, looking up at his back, and then, with this burning emotion, spread the legend of Uchiha to the earth. The root ninja took a deep breath, folded his arms, and shouted coldly, "Watch carefully, he has only one mission, and that is, victory." As the root ninja finished his words, within the barrier, the young man faced the 300 Sands village soldiers alone. Then, he began to take steps, 1, 2, 3, countless steps, until he leaned over and suddenly charged. The wind blew up his hairline, making his black robe rustle. Under the first wave of kunai rain, amid the fanatical shouts of the Sand village ninjas, on this battlefield where only the victor can escape, Uchiha strode forward, forming hand seals. "Hi, Su, Yu, Shen, Wei." With his eyes wide open, he leaped high, and the young man's roar resounded throughout the battlefield. Spirit Summoning Jutsu, 10,000 Snakes. Chapter 134, Split the enemy formation with swords and behead the commander. At this moment, a two-pronged collision. Uchiha couldn't help but recall his ancestors' heroic dance amidst the combined forces of the Fourth Shinobi World War. Of course, he wanted to pay tribute. But Uchiha wasn't Uchiha Madara. He didn't possess the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, the Gundam, the exquisite skills honed through a long life, or the boundless chakra of his impure world reincarnation body. While his shuriken skills might rival his ancestors, his physical, sword, and ninjutsu skills weren't enough to sustain him amidst the vast enemy. However, he had his advantages. In this battle, he wanted to win quickly. A rustling sound pierced the air, and a kunai coated in green venom flew past his face. Mid-air, Uchiha looked up at the sky filled with poison kunai and various hidden weapons, his eyes narrowed slightly. His Sharingan focused, and he immediately brought both palms down upon the air. Bang! Smoke rose, swirling and swirling. A massive summoning technique suddenly expanded wildly, accompanied by the roar of a heavy object falling. Dust, white smoke, stones, and even the fragments of limbs crushed by the giant object all flew out in a chaotic manner after the sound. A sudden silence fell on the battlefield. From the hazy white mist under the moonlight, a ferocious, enormous purple snake had suddenly pierced through the mist and ascended. Above the desert, the commanding Sands village genin quickly leaped away, dodging the incoming boulders, his eyes filled with astonishment. The moment he saw the snake, sweat dripped down his face. As a veteran Sands village genin, he had seen this terrifying summoned beast during the Second Shinobi World War and, accordingly, he had heard of the snake's brutality and cruelty. Seeing this, his eyes widened, and he shouted, "That's Orochimaru's summoned beast. Everyone gather, use Winjutsu to repel it, don't let it get through, don't let it get through." If the snakes were allowed to charge through, even he would struggle to resist such a terrifying summoned beast, let alone the Chunin and genin in the camp. It would be a situation where the tail would be destroyed and the head would be gone. As the command was issued, the Sand village forces responded immediately, detaching several teams that had been preparing to unleash ninjutsu and charging in that direction. At that moment, standing atop the snake's head, Uchiha scanned the battlefield and quickly locked onto the Sands village genin, who was issuing orders and looked like a leader. The 10,000 snakes at his feet, just as they came to their senses, saw the brat standing on their forehead, who had made him furious at the mere sight of him. The 10,000 snakes were immediately displeased. "Huh, you idiot brat again. I'm going to eat you." Uchiha saw this and raised his eyebrows. Before the 10,000 snakes could react and get intimate with him, he smiled slightly and kindly reminded them, "Watch your head, stupid snake." After saying that, he jumped off the 10,000 snakes' forehead without even turning his head. The 10,000 snakes were stunned for a moment. When they looked up, they saw a sky full of kunai flying down like dumplings. They immediately let out a scream, hiss, "Damn it, you evil Uchiha brat, you summoned me out for this." The clanging sound of kunai and ninjutsu falling quickly drowned out the screams of the 10,000 snakes above their foreheads. All that remained in his ears was a monotonous humming sound. Stepping on the massive body of the Mang snake, Uchiha slid down and landed with a flip. Using the vast white smoke of the summoning technique as a shield, he leaned against the Mang snake's body, concealing his presence while scanning the battlefield with his Sharingan. Summoning the Mang snake consumed nearly a third of his chakra, effectively allowing it to take the brunt of the blows. Simultaneously, It drew the attention of the initial wave of enemies. Even his immortal body couldn't completely ignore the combined ninjutsu of the ninja unit. Whether it was Wind Style, Great Saidachi or Wind Style, Great Breakthrough, individually, his immortal body's resistance to ninjutsu could easily be ignored. However, when unleashed by multiple ninjas, such techniques were incredibly powerful. A single strike would break bones at best, or half his body would be blown away, his movements restricted and then captured, leaving him vulnerable to the Sand Ninja's forcible wounding. That situation would be extremely difficult to handle. To break the enemy's formation and achieve a quick victory, the only way was to charge into it. Uchiha Chi unleashed his mastery of hand-to-hand combat. And Mang Snake didn't even need his Sharingan's Genjutsu to control it. Now, faced with this pile of sacrifices, despite the foolish snake's outburst of anger, it was probably just about to open a bottle of champagne to celebrate. Uchiha Chi closely watched the shifting formations behind the white mist. Seeing the enemy's combined ninjutsu team being deployed towards Mang Snake, his eyes narrowed, and he immediately lunged at the gap in the enemy's formation. His footsteps kicked up dust, the rustle of wind rustling past his ears. His lone charge seemed insignificant compared to the commotion caused by Mang Snake's massive bulk. However, after he kicked aside a troublesome genin and charged into the enemy's formation, the perceptions of all Sans Shinobi would be completely altered. Uchiha Chi's face twisted into a slightly maniacal grin. As he charged, he raised his hand and slapped the enemy right in the heart. The Tsunagakure who were passing along spotted him and rushed to intercept him, shouting, "That brat's here, kill him!" He ducked to avoid a kunai thrust from the Tsunagakure, then rolled sideways, unleashing a swastika-shaped taijutsu. With a sinister sidekick, he knocked the ninja off his feet, stepped on his back, and leaped into the heart of the enemy formation. 7 or 8 more Tsunagakure swung kunai at him, slashed with swords, and formed hand seals. Suddenly, swords and blades clashed, wind blades pierced his face, and the earth collapsed. However, Uchiha Chi ignored it all, letting the swords and blades slash, letting the kunai pierce his abdomen, letting the wind blades pierce his chest, tearing a gaping wound. The small zero tail in his abdomen grunted as it opened the door to dark chakra. In his chest, his heart suddenly lit up. A white-hot flame centered around him, suddenly unleashing a firestorm. It deflected, burned, and sent a whole circle of sand ninja flying back. Boom! A large sun suddenly rose from the spot, a massive ball of blazing light converging towards its center, converging on the boy's right arm. The arm shone so brightly it practically blinded anyone. The next moment, Uchiha Chi, pierced like a hedgehog and drenched in blood, raised an eyebrow. "Wow! I feel like I could kill a cow right now." Gently waving his right hand, blazing as bright as daylight, he felt a Kirin arm brimming with immense power. This move focused the chakra bursts from Fire-style chakra mode onto his right arm. While using Fire-style chakra mode, he prevented the surrounding flames from burning through the threads. His left hand could also utilize the Uchiha-style silk manipulation shuriken technique, ensuring rapid maneuverability. In extreme cases, you can even chop off your hands and throw them out to use as high-explosive grenades. Apart from the slight burn, everything is perfect. While Uchiha Chi is in a good mood, on the other hand, it's the turn of the Tsunagakure Jonin in charge of command to be dumbfounded. He had just stopped Manserver when a reckless man rushed in from the other side. Now, what choice should he make? Looking at Uchiha Chi, who had been stabbed like a hedgehog, a normal person would have been killed long ago, the Tsunagakure commander's eyelids twitched wildly. How could that brat still be able to fight despite being so injured? Could he be a disciple of Tsunade, one of the 3 ninjas? But why does he have 1,000 snakes as his summoning beast, and he's wearing Uchiha attire? That's too weird. Is this guy a disciple of Tsunade or a descendant of Orochimaru? And what exactly is that jutsu? The Tsunagakure commander's eyelids twitched as he looked at Uchiha Chi's dazzling right arm. Although he didn't understand what it was, he subconsciously knew it was no good. He immediately gestured towards the Tsunagakure in his direction. Soon, the Tsunagakure spread out, with Uchiha Chi at the center. Ninjas, already forming hand seals and preparing jutsu, immediately took over, forming an impenetrable circle. The next round of attack was about to begin. Yet, the surrounded youth remained unfazed, his teeth bared. Then, with his blindingly bright right hand, he drew the long sword from his waist and raised it toward the sky. The next moment, within the barrier, blazing flames erupted with a violent storm. A scene even more terrifying than the sight of thousands of snakes crashing into the center of the camp unfolded. A giant, Piercing, blazing sword, soared upwards, rising steadily as the Tsunagakure's horrified gazes, as if they were looking at God. Then, the sword, aimed directly at the Tsunagakure genin commanding the battle formation, struck down with a single blow. Chapter 135 Broken Sword Hurricane, Messy Dance. Facing the 40-meter-long flowing flame sword's furious slash, the mere force of the sword's swing unleashed a violent gust of wind. It blew the Tsunagakure's feet back 2 meters, their faces bulging and sunken, nearly sending them flying. The hand seals they were forming were momentarily unsustainable. They could only gaze in horror at the piercing, earth-shattering flowing flame sword crashing down. Ninjutsu Squad, assemble. Quickly, and all the genin, bring your teams to form a joint ninjutsu team. The Tsunagakure commander, upon witnessing this, felt his scalp tingle. His eyes widened as he roared. The sword's reach was so vast that he, in the center, had no escape. And as the leader of the unit, if you were beheaded, it would be difficult to organize an effective ninja force to counter the seemingly invincible imp. If this strike landed, the Tsunagakure would face nothing but defeat. The Sand Village's formation shifted rapidly. 7 elite squads, deployed on the left, right, and center wings, as well as those on the front lines against the snakes, turned and moved rapidly toward the center at the command of the commanding ninja. The Sand Village commander roared his next order, "Everyone, unleash your ninjutsu indiscriminately into the sky. Destroy this sword." The next moment, the Sand Village ninjas, gazing up from the ground, suppressed a shudder of fear as if they had seen a god. They formed hand seals and roared in unison toward the heavens. Wind style, wind cutting technique, wind style, great breakthrough, water style, water gravel, earth style, earth flowing wall, earth style, earth rising spear, countless ninjutsu, countless wind blades, stone pillars rising from the ground, flaming balls, rock bullets, earth spears, kunai, saw blades and sharp blades shot by puppets, even tiny poisonous needles thrown by desperate genin. This dense attack, instantly crushed by the giant sword that covered all vision, like a meteorite, was like a meteorite crashing down. It vaporized, evaporated, and disintegrated. Then, rising from the ground, a continuous stream of attacks. Under such an intense attack, the slashing momentum of the giant sword of flowing flames was also affected. But this little delay was enough. The 7 elite teams, including the Tsunagakure commanding genin himself, were now in place. 8 genin and 15 elite chunin. Their faces darkened. They gazed upwards, forming hand seals and raising their hands. Opening their palms toward the sky, they shouted, "Combined ninjutsu, wind style, super great scythe weasel jutsu." A wind style far exceeding the normal great scythe weasel jutsu erupted instantly. A massive storm, with a radius exceeding 10 meters, surged skyward. Roaring, exploding, draining the air, creating a vacuum. Countless air currents collided, countless wind blades tangled. It was as if 10,000 knives had appeared from thin air, slashing wildly upwards. This massive storm collided with a flowing flame sword instantly. Flames flashed, and the wind crushed. From the point of collision, a fierce wind instantly whipped up a terrifying sandstorm. From the Gobi Desert, red willows and camel thorns were tossed up into the air, and coarse sand and gravel flew in all directions like shotgun shells, leaving a crisscross pattern of sharp cuts. Then, the sky suddenly cleared. The terrifyingly powerful flowing flame sword was instantly shattered by this attack, exploding into a sky of sparks. Like a spectacular fireworks display, it illuminated the entire battlefield like daylight, then vanished in the night sky in an instant. Surrounded by the Tsunagakure forces, Uchiha Chi's expression suddenly changed, and he gritted his teeth. The ninjas of the great nation were indeed not as simple as he had imagined. Wind style, great scythe Ichi jutsu was only a B-rank ninjutsu, but when unleashed by such a coordinated group of elite ninjutsu, capable of forming a united ninjutsu, it could unleash a power comparable to that of an S-rank ninjutsu. Tisk, this is trouble. Uchiha Chi glanced grimly at the Tsunagakure center. The flowing flame sword, like the flame fist that shattered Hirame's glittering blade, was a variation of fire style, chakra mode, both employing immense amounts of dark chakra and the forbidden technique, flesh transmutation, a terrifying ninjutsu that extracted chakra. In other words, with a zero tail in his current reserves, he could only use this massive jutsu once more. This time, he seized the opportunity while the enemy was dealing with Amanda to launch his ultimate surprise attack. But the next time, with intelligence known and under constant surveillance, Another decapitation in decisive battle would be nearly impossible. After the scene, the battlefield regained its focus. The 300 Tsunagakure looked upon the giant sword exploding in the night sky, the blazing sparks scattering across the sky, and their morale instantly soared. Everyone's gaze towards the encircled brat suddenly shifted. Uchiha Chi instantly felt a stream of malicious, murderous, and extreme gazes directed at him. And before him, a long line of subtitles suddenly scrolled downwards. Simply put, the 300 Tsunagakure think you're nothing special. Before his eyes, large red dots lit up above the heads and faces of every Tsunagakure. It was as if a group of voluptuous women were flirting, posing in all sorts of sexual positions to seduce Uchiha Chi. Come on, Uchiha Chi said. He took a deep breath, his gaze narrowed, and he fixed his gaze squarely on the genin commanding the central Tsunagakure army. Then, with a furious curse, damn it! I really didn't want to dance, you guys made me do this. The flames on his body suddenly died down, and his right hand, charred to charcoal, healed with visible speed. Uchiha Chi plucked out the kunai, katana, and senbon, from his body one by one, tossing them to the ground. Clink, clang. They stared at the expressionless young man before them, his black hair and red eyes, drenched in blood. They watched his injuries heal at breakneck speed, watched the scornful indifference in his pupils, watched him stroll through the enemy lines as if he were strolling in his own backyard. The wind died down, leaving only the rumble of rapid breathing, the gulping of saliva, and the piercing cries of vultures that had taken flight from the night sky, smelling the fishy scent. Cry. The faces of the Tsunagakure soldiers were filled with terror, their eyes widening, their grips on their weapons trembling uncontrollably. Their expressions mirror those of the ninjas who faced Uchiha Madara, the Shura of the ninja world, during the Fourth Shinobi World War. After that stunning decapitation strike, they didn't know just how formidable Uchiha Madara was, but they knew this young man before them could truly annihilate them with a single blow. Huh? Let's begin then. Uchiha Chi let out a deep breath, raising his head. His Sharingan flickered, drawing pulsating crimson lines through the night. He quickly surveyed the battlefield, its terrain completely altered. The previous strike had forced the Sand Village to unleash countless earth escape techniques. Now, the landscape before him had transformed into a forest of rock pillars. Add to that the wind-eroded rock pillars already prevalent in the Gobi Desert, and this terrain was perfect for Uchiha Chi's battle. With his adrenaline surging, he instantly memorized the entire terrain, mentally constructing routes to penetrate the enemy lines. He swept his hands back, placing them on the 6 ninja tool pouches at his waist. With a flick of his fingers, he raised his wrists and unleashed a burst of shurikens. Uchiha Chi suddenly glared with his Sharingan, thrusting his legs forward, his lips curled high. Under the influence of dark chakra, an inexplicable surge of extreme excitement began to well up in his heart. He grinned and shouted loudly, "Come and try to stop me. Gravels of sand? Well, take my move first, ninjutsu, throw all shurikens." Under the stunned gaze of the Sand Village, Uchiha Chi unleashed full force, his hands twitching as if in a convulsion, leaving a trail of afterimages barely discernible to the naked eye. Then, 8, 16, 32, 64, 280. Countless threads, countless shurikens. Like a barrage of bullets, they shot out indiscriminately. In just 3 seconds, the young man before him unleashed a torrent of shurikens comparable to what a Sand Village squadron could unleash in a single volley. Damn it! What's wrong with this kid? The 20 or so Tsunagakure in a circle in front of Uchiha Shishin's body suddenly gasped. Watching the shurikens before them, ricocheting, rebounding, and soaring in all sorts of stunning arcs, they were horrified by this simple, yet ridiculously effective attack method. They quickly dropped to the ground, each seeking cover. A wave of shock washed over them. Why the hell is this kid so good at shooting? When the hail of shurikens subsided, they looked up again, only to be horrified to find that the kid had vanished without a trace. Is he trying to hide this way? No, he might be trying to sneak up on our commander again. The Tsunagakure looked around, but they had lost sight of the young man. They frantically tried to react like ants on a hot pan. A sand ninja immediately shouted angrily to stop the panic, shouting, "Damn it! Someone report to the commander." However, the next moment, a brilliant, cold sword light suddenly flashed in a circle. From behind the sand ninja, a figure as sharp as an arrow suddenly leaped out. Holding the Kusanagi sword, which reflected the moonlight like autumn water, one hand held the earth-wrath thread, which completely concealed its presence in the night. Spinning and leaping in midair, like a moon thief, they danced with chaotic steps and twisted steps, then flew down, swung their sword in a circle, and slashed downward. Puff! In an instant, the loudest Sans ninja was knocked to the ground with a single blow, unable to get up. The Tsunagakure were startled and turned to look. They saw the young man raise his hand, tap his toes in the pool of blood, and with a chaotic, unruly dance, he leaped into the air again. Then, crouching atop a tall, wind-eroded rock pillar, a huge full moon reflected behind him. His face was hidden in the shadows behind the moonlight, leaving only a pair of crimson, gleaming sharingans that silently moved. Looking down at the Tsunagakure below, their faces filled with horror and tingling with fear, they heard the young man smile faintly and pronounce coldly, "Although the plan has changed, but, this is now my hunting ground." If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136, Physical Skill Upgrade, Breaking into the Enemy Formation. Amidst a forest of earth and rock spikes, growing inverted and reaching skyward across the Gobi Desert, paths twisted and turned, the ground cracked and crisscrossed. The resurgent wind slowly flowed through the eroded rock pillars, making a whistling sound. Even though the Sans village had gained the upper hand, the terrifying sight of that sword strike, along with the figure of that young man, standing tall and unwavering like a lone wolf on a mountaintop, had already been deeply engraved in the minds of the Sans village present. It was practically a nightmare. The Sand village commander breathed a sigh of relief and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The dazzling and impressive special effects of that sword strike had nearly frightened him to death. However, in actual combat, under the combined attack of the vacuum wind blades of the ninja technique, wind style, super Kimaitachi, the sword had simply exploded. This allowed the Sans village commander to instantly analyze a lot of things. He raised his head and looked at the battlefield that had temporarily fallen silent. There was no contempt in his eyes anymore. He frowned, pondered for a moment, and speculated, "It seems that the brat won't be able to use that kind of move a second time in a short time, even if it happens again. This time, we only need to split up 4 teams to ensure a complete solution. The remaining people can be sent to the Manda snake and will be enough to resist the snake." Thinking of this, the Sand village commander let out a deep breath and said thankfully, "Fortunately, it's just a brat. If Orochimaru came in person, we wouldn't be enough for him to kill. Let's get rid of them quickly." The Sand village commander took a deep breath and was about to give an order. At this time, a Sand village chunin showed fear on his face. He stepped on the barbed stone pillars on the ground and rushed over. The expression on his face was as if he had seen a ghost. As soon as he got close, he opened his mouth and opened and closed it like a drowning fish, gasping for breath and screaming, "Sir, oh no!" The Tsunagakure commander had just finished analyzing the situation, feeling confident of victory, and was quietly sighing at his exceptional combat intelligence when he was suddenly interrupted. His face froze, and he looked up, bewildered, and asked, "Huh? What's wrong, sir? That brat, he's not human." The Tsunagakure Chunin's face was filled with panic, his arm trembling as he pointed behind him, his body shaking like a sieve. "No, calm down, explain clearly, how is he not human?" The Tsunagakure commander's mouth twitched as he asked in a serious tone, "And what exactly happened?" The Tsunagakure ninja swallowed and turned away. "Look over there." The Tsunagakure commander frowned at the words and looked up. Under the enchanting moonlight and in the quiet spring breeze, a forest of stone pillars, their thorns pointed upwards, suddenly trembled. In an instant, the roaring light of ninjutsu painted the surrounding area pale white. Then, a figure, so fast that it was unimaginable, flew into the sky, zipping through the air, descending in the arc of a full moon, passing by the edge of ninjutsu, as if spreading wings and gliding. A pair of scarlet eyes reflected the moon in the sky, shining brightly. As the young man spun around, a moon-like arc of light followed him like a shadow. Gravel, clods of earth, wind blades, weeds, camel thorns. After this rapidly spinning sword light, dancing wildly in the moonlight, swept across, they flew up and down and fell. Ugh, puff, help, get away, stay away from me. You devil, don't come over here. The next moment, the miserable howls of the Sand ninja suddenly tore through the silent air, bringing this silent killing to the stage. The eyes of the Sand village commander widened instantly. Why Why can this brat fly? It's just like a bird flying in the sky. The sand village chunin immediately shouted in a hurry, "Sir, make a decision quickly. If you don't care, he will rush over." Huff, huff. The sand village commander was sweating profusely, and the pressure increased dramatically. Faced with this completely new approach, he also panicked. However, as an elite member of the sand village, he made a decision quickly. He immediately turned his head and ordered the elite around him in a deep voice, "Sakuta, Aini, and Takatsugu, you immediately lead the team to intercept the 10,000 snakes. Don't let it rush into our position. Once we let that snake in, everything will be over." Then, the sand village commander's eyes became fierce, and he put his hands together and shouted, "Here, our 4 teams and all the people in the army will stop this kid. We will kill him." On the other side, Uchiha Chi rushed quickly in the barbed stone forest, holding the Kusanagi sword in one hand, and the other hand constantly controlling the earth resentment silk thread, picking up the ninja tool from the ground and throwing it, then pulling the silk thread with both hands, stepping on the ground and jumping high, flying high into the sky, and swinging into the shadows. Changing position, he suddenly pounced on the sand villagers, some reacting and some not, trading their lives for theirs, fighting tooth and nail, eliminating any who stood in his way. His only goal was to charge into the sand village's center and complete his unfinished decapitation mission. As Uchiha Chi eliminated each sand villager that stood in his way, a series of subtitles quickly appeared before his eyes. "You bravely counterattacked a sand village genin who wanted to kill you, gaining a random skill from them. Treading water, your treading water proficiency increased. You bravely gained a random skill from them. Wind style, fierce wind palm, you bravely gained a random skill from them. Transformation jutsu." The periphery consisted mostly of sand village cannon fodder genin, nearly all newly minted, with mostly useless D and A rank skills they'd likely never use many times in their lifetimes. Receiving a skill repeatedly increased proficiency. If anything had any impact, it was probably as basic taijutsu. With constant battle and constant confrontation, this foundational ability improved, allowing Uchiha Chi's previously immature taijutsu to rapidly improve. He soon surpassed the proficiency barrier and reached the mastery level. His footwork became swifter, his sword swings more precise. With this improvement in his foundational skills, Uchiha Chi devised many new uses for his chaotic taijutsu and swordsmanship, and began to conceive of how to fuse them together to form the outlines of a higher-level ability. However, at this moment, Uchiha Chi, sprinting towards his next target, suddenly felt a chill on his back, and alarm bells rang in his heart. He instinctively stopped, tapped his toes, and leaped back. The next moment, a violent gust of wind, coming from afar, crashed down on his spot. Combined ninjutsu, wind release, vacuum great ball. In an instant, a gust of wind exploded, sending dense blades scattering in all directions, tearing the ground apart. The fierce wind blew Uchiha Chi back over 3 meters, his body suddenly covered with 6 bloody wounds from the wind blades that had passed through him. He raised his head, pulled the silk thread, and leaped to the top of a stone pillar. His crimson eyes suddenly focused. At the center of the Tsunagakure army, 4 squads, including the commander, 12 elite Tsunagakure soldiers, stared coldly at him. Their hands formed hand seals in unison, and wind balls formed, ready to be released. The surrounding environment and atmosphere suddenly changed. The genin, who had been there for the count, were quietly withdrawn. The ninjas who surrounded them from the darkness had a completely different aura than before. Uchiha Chi's eyes narrowed slightly, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he glanced around warily. He licked his lips slightly and couldn't help but chuckle. That's more like it. It's boring to keep letting these scumbags get killed. With that, Uchiha Chi took a lunge step, his fingers flexing as he leaped high into the air, continuing his charge towards the center. As he moved, over a dozen sand village chunin leaped down from behind and in front of him, attacking him at close range. A kunai, accompanied by a sizzling, flaming detonating talisman, flew towards him. Uchiha Chi raised his eyebrows slightly, bent down, and a puff of water formed on his feet. He used water-style, water cut to reduce friction between his feet and the ground. Then, with a sudden tug of his left hand, pulling on the silk thread, his speed suddenly increased. He caught the kunai with 2 fingers before the detonating talisman exploded. Then, without looking back, he swung it to the side and behind. Boom! Hot wind blew from behind his head. Ignoring the subtitles floating in front of him, Uchiha Chi leaped up and jumped into the center of the enemy's encirclement. He kicked a Sand Village warrior in the face and knocked him over, then dodged a sword slash by side. He raised his Sharingan and glared, instantly hypnotizing the Sand Village warrior in front of him. He raised his palm to hit his jaw, bent down to squat to avoid a horizontal sword light, and kicked two Sand Village warriors with a sweeping leg. Then, Uchiha Chi used his palms to support the ground, did a somersault and jumped up, swung the Kusanagi sword and knocked down a Sand Village warrior with a powerful and heavy Tangzu. In the siege of 4 people who rushed up, he used the Cloud Flow sword technique, Deceptive Slash. In the enemy's astonished eyes, he turned around and used the Cloud Flow, Inner Slash to go around behind the opponent, turned around and performed an Uchiha style, Instantaneous Slash, and knocked all 4 people over. Sword flashes, mirrored by moonlight, gushed forth continuously, and the enemies before him fell one after another. His taijutsu, refined through the constant battles, grew in proficiency. Blocks, counters, sneak attacks, and combat footwork, all abounding in his combat intuition, were unleashed to their full potential. The distant Tsunagakure commander's eyes shrieked with rage. The Tsunagakure Chunin standing beside him shouted urgently, "Sir, don't wait. He's too strong, just attack. Even if it means sacrificing some men, as long as we can kill that brat, it's worth it." The Tsunagakure Jounin gritted his teeth. He had never imagined that a mere brat could be so formidable. Even the 10 elite Chunin squads dispatched in a hasty attack were powerless. They couldn't even extract anything from the brat. "It's come to this," the Tsunagakure commander's eyes sternly turned, and he immediately shouted fiercely, "Everyone listen, combine ninjutsu coverage, directly bombarded area, blast everything into ash." Chapter 137 Wind-Style Vacuum Blade, a brand new swordsmanship system. Amidst a chaotic stone forest, Uchiha Chi flew up and down, parrying attacks left and right, his Kusanagi sword dancing in a continuous stream of light and shadow. Countless wounds appeared on his body, but they always healed and repaired at a visible speed, returning him to pristine condition. The Tsunagakure ninja grew increasingly apprehensive. The brat's swordsmanship was initially quite rigid, and they found opportunities to injure him, but it was no use. This brat was practically indestructible. Moreover, his swordsmanship proficiency quickly soared at an insane rate. He mastered the techniques of the Yun Ryu, Uchiha Ryu, Hozuki Ryu, and Uno Ryu, along with the fundamental ninja swordsmanship, and a variety of highly effective, direct hitting taijutsu techniques. The pressure on the Tsunagakure ninja suddenly intensified. At that moment, Uchiha Chi felt a sudden sense of relief, as if some mysterious shackle had been brutally ripped apart. A subtitle suddenly appeared before his eyes: "Your swordsmanship has been integrated. You have mastered the unnamed swordsmanship, B+, mastered." Uchiha Chi suddenly raised his head. Through his Sharingan, the movements of the Tsunagakure before him seemed slightly dissonant with their actual movements. He seemed to be able to see their next move. For example, the Tsunagakure before him, holding a kune with a wind-style vacuum blade attached to it, would stagger and strike a sword towards his stomach. Previously, Uchiha Chi would have been forced to withstand the blow, retaliating at the cost of being ripped open. In the process, he might have been stabbed several times in the back by other ninjas. But now, Uchiha Chi twisted his steps to stop his charge, dodging the sword while bending down and sliding past the opponent's feet. With his left hand, he whipped out a kune and thrust it hard at the exposed toes of the opponent's open-toed shoes. "Ouch!" A scream rang out from above his forehead. Uchiha Chi supported himself on the ground with one hand and leaped up. In mid-air, he raised the hilt of his sword and slammed it against his heart. He spun around and slashed out horizontally. A circle of flaming sword light instantly drew a stunning circular cut in the enemy formation. Swoosh! Flames exploded, and a circle of flaming fire rapidly expanded, enlarged, and swept in all directions. The besieged Sand Village was instantly blown away in all directions. For a moment, there was no Sand Village who could stand in front of Uchiha anymore. A long row of subtitles flashed before his eyes. Uchiha Chi, as if struck by something, ignored the chaotic flurry of ninjutsu and taijutsu that had just appeared, his gaze fixed squarely on one line: "You bravely defeated the Sand Village special genin who attempted to kill you. You gained a random skill from him, wind style, vacuum blade, B, proficient. Your counterattack was powerful, and the opponent was already dead, unable to refute. Bonus, critical hit, your skill has critically hit. Current attribute, wind style, super vacuum blade, A, mastery, you have acquired numerous wind style ninjutsu. Now, perhaps you could try training in wind attribute nature changes, wind style, vacuum blade. This jutsu appears twice in the original story. Once, during Danzo's battle against Sasuke, it attached wind attribute chakra to a kune, forming a long sword composed of sharp wind, a powerful weapon. The other time was during Madara Uchiha's dance among the allied ninja forces, when the Kumagakure ninja, whom Uchiha Madara had grabbed by the neck and greeted, used it. Although the users were utterly defeated, this had nothing to do with the technique. It was incredibly versatile. It was very similar to Uchiha Chi's current water style, Water Fang Blade, and the flame Tachi formed by infusing the Kusanagi sword with fire attribute chakra. The moment he saw this technique, Uchiha Chi's mind erupted with the initial idea of the power he had combined with everything he had learned so far. It was as if he had found a key. A new world had opened up. Above ninjutsu, there were combined ninjutsu, and above swordsmanship, there were only combined swordsmanship. Uchiha Chi's gaze fixed, and he instinctively considered integrating this ninjutsu and swordsmanship into his system. However, at that moment, a strange, distorted, and supercharged sound suddenly echoed in his ears. Uchiha Chi looked up, startled to see a shadow sweeping across dozens of meters overhead, completely enveloping the area. In the distance, 3 cold, indifferent shouts echoed: wind style, great net, earth style, earth pillar explosion, combined ninjutsu, wind style, super Kumaitachi jutsu. Uchiha Chi's pupils shrank sharply upon hearing these words. Wind style, great net unleashed a fierce wind, slicing the ground and lifting clumps of sand and earth. Then, earth style, earth pillar explosion lifted a pillar of earth, shattering it into fragments like bullets. Finally, the combined ninjutsu, super Kumaitachi jutsu unleashed a violent gust of wind, hurling the stones and rocks along with the wind blades. In an instant, a dense barrage of wind blades capable of cleaving through trees and rock cannons of various sizes descended upon him. The entire sky suddenly darkened, and like a cascading ochre waterfall, it enveloped the area beneath Uchiha Chi's feet. Under the combined ninjutsu of this magnitude, even Uchiha Chi, possessing immortality, would be shattered into pieces and buried on the spot. Uchiha Chi's scalp tingled at the sight, and he immediately slid backwards, yanking on the silk thread and rapidly retreating. In the distance, the Tsunagakure commander listened to the reports of the retreating genin while raising his hands to form hand seals. His gaze was mesmerizing as Uchiha Chi, tugging on the silk thread amidst the rain of wind blades, dodging and leaping in such an extreme environment. So, that ability to glide through the air is enabled by silk thread. Then, after this move, this entire place will be raised to the ground. Without this means of movement, how will you cope? He sneered, clasped his palms together, formed hand seals, and leaned back. Suddenly, he unleashed another concentrated wind-style jewel, blasting it towards the fleeing Uchiha Chi. As soon as it launched, 11 wind bombs arced in its wake. Here, a sky of wind blades, along with a rain of sandstone, descended, and in an instant, the earth shook. The spiky earth and rock forest, pointed upward like a waterfall, was instantly crushed into dust by the combined ninjutsu, sending up a cloud of dust that was then instantly shattered and blown away by the wind. The Gobi Desert suddenly cleared, and Uchiha Chi's silk thread was abruptly severed by a wind blade flying through the air. Like a kite with a broken string, he plummeted to the ground, rolling 7 or 8 meters, his ribs broken. He climbed to his feet, dusty and gritty. Without even wiping his face, he suddenly felt something was wrong and leaped to his feet. A wind bullet landed on the spot, and a second rebound of wind blade slashed Uchiha Chi's body, leaving 3 or 4 more bloody wounds. Gritting his teeth, he endured the pain and somersaulted backward, dodging a barrage of wind bullets like a chain. Finally, in mid-air, with no escape left, he wielded his flaming sword and twisted his body to block it. Bang! Uchiha Chi was hurled back, sinking deeply into the ground. He looked up at the 12 wind bombs that flew towards him before he could even catch his breath, and suddenly felt like cursing. Damn it! Uchiha Chi cursed in frustration, unleashing his full strength on the forbidden technique, flesh transformation, to heal his wounds. He immediately rolled over, dodging the chain of wind bombs and attempting another charge. But the continuous barrage of wind bombs blocked his path, forcing him back. At the beginning of his charge, he had been only 40 meters away from the enemy, but now the distance had grown even wider, reaching nearly 60 meters. This short distance, like an insurmountable chasm, stood in Uchiha Chi's way. This was exactly the situation he least wanted to see. He had assumed that if he broke into the enemy's formation, they would be wary of using large-scale ninjutsu, fearing accidental casualties. This would allow him to penetrate and forcibly break up the core of the Tsunagakure formation. Facing a group of elite Tsunagakure ninjas unable to form a unified jutsu, Uchiha Chi, with his current abilities, could easily advance and retreat 7 times. However, the enemy's ferocity far exceeded Uchiha Chi's expectations. In the previous wave, Uchiha Chi had barely cut down many, yet the Tsunagakure's numbers had been drastically reduced to fewer than 200, most of them killed by their own ninja. Uchiha Chi seized the opportunity, took 2 deep breaths, wiped his dust-covered face, and stared grimly at the 12 Tsunagakure elites across from him. Those around him perished instantly, without even a groan. In this situation, Uchiha Chi couldn't even recharge Zero Tail. His own chakra and stamina were already reaching their limit. This isn't a solution, we'll have to take a gamble. Uchiha Chi's face darkened, and he looked down at the Kusanagi sword in his hand. When he obtained Wind Style, Vacuum Blade, he instantly thought of a jutsu that could resolve the current situation. It was the future jutsu that Yamato and Naruto would perform together, the Hurricane Water Vortex Jutsu. This jutsu, combining Water Style, Tornado and Wind Style, Rasengan, creates a massive water spout, similar to dragon siphoning water, effective against aerial targets. In other words, it's a defensive jutsu, giving Uchiha Chi an opportunity to penetrate the enemy's core position. Uchiha Chi had also witnessed a combination of Wind Style and Fire Style firsthand, as Kakuzu had used against him, the composite ninjutsu, Flame Wind Rumble and Strange Face Explosion. Each of these 2 combined jutsu possesses the power of an S-rank jutsu. Originally, Uchiha Chi would have been unable to perform it. However, just as he had completed a series of Wind Style jutsu, pushing his understanding of wind to the point of transforming its properties, he obtained this core jutsu, Wind Style, Vacuum Blade. When this ninjutsu meets the Water Style, Water Fang Blade and his Kusanagi sword, Flame Tachi, Uchiha Chi feels that this might create an unexpected spark. And this is also very likely to create a brand new swordsmanship system. Chapter 138 Breaking the Formation. Swordplay, Hurricane, Water Vortex, Flame Wind, Dragon Dance. Wind Style, Rasengan and Water Style, Broken Flow share the same characteristics. They are both intense and have undergone a transformation. Therefore, when these 2 techniques are combined, they can form a swirling water tornado capable of withstanding Kakuzu's Strange Face Blast. The same is true of Uchiha Chi's Water Style, Water Fang Blade and Wind Style, Vacuum Blade, both are intense in form. The Water Fang Blade is a swirling blade of water, while the Vacuum Blade is entwined with an incredibly sharp wind. Furthermore, he had already mastered the transformation of the water attribute back in the land of hot water, all he lacked now was the transformation of the wind attribute. Uchiha Chi gazed intently at the night sky. There, 12 wind gusts shot forth. The wind howled, swirling clouds of dust, and the compressed wind blades within shone with a chilling light under the moonlight. If he couldn't deal with this, facing this endless onslaught, he would ultimately be charging in vain, ultimately to his death. Since charging meant death, and not charging also meant death, then there was no choice but to take a gamble. Uchiha Chi stood still, took a deep breath, his Sharingan fixed on the gust of wind shooting down from the night sky. He dispersed the flowing flames from the Kusanagi sword in his hand and formed hand seals with both hands. As the tail seal fell, he boldly raised the Kusanagi sword, pouring the chakra from his right hand into this divine weapon that perfectly channeled chakra. A deep blue water blade suddenly swirled from the Kusanagi sword. The water blade spun at a rapid speed, emitting a terrifying squeak. Then, wisps of sharp wind rose from his left hand and gradually filled the sword. The water blade visibly expanded, as if it would disintegrate and explode in the next second. The fusion of the 2 techniques was incredibly complex. If it weren't for the Uchiha's Sharingan, which allowed him to discern the direction of the chakra threatening to burst forth, and his mastery of both techniques, an explosion would have occurred instantly. Just a little more, Uchiha Chi stared intently at the Kusanagi sword in his hand, veins bulging in his arms and trembling slightly as he struggled to control the 2 distinct streams of chakra within the blade. The Kusanagi sword, which he usually wielded with ease, now felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. What's wrong? Why can't they fuse together? As the wind-style great ball shot down with a sharp tail, Uchiha Chi gritted his teeth, looked up at the wind-style great ball suddenly hurtling towards him from the sky, and couldn't help but widen his eyes. Then, He shouted angrily, "Never mind. Just do it. Spin, come out." Uchiha Chi suddenly raised the nearly exploding sword in his hand and pointed it skyward. Then, he stepped on the ground, twisted the hilt, and madly poured his own chakra into it, not caring whether it would merge or not, simply setting it in motion. Turn, turn, turn furiously. Water and wind clung to each other in the rotation, merging into a single point, reaching their peak. Finally, ninjutsu, hurricane water vortex sword, a streak of blue light shot out from the tip of the sword, piercing straight into the sky. Then, with this line as its center, a massive blue water spout exploded with a bang. Like a blooming mandala, petal-like white wind blades and blue water blades swirled wildly around the main stem. A brilliant blue-white glow illuminated the earth, instantly turning the Gobi Desert into a disco. Then, the water spout collided head-on with a series of gusts of wind. Uchiha Chi's eyes widened, his hands tightly gripping the hilt. He bent to a stance and twisted his waist, forcibly twisting the sword in the dancing, massive spiral of water. As he swung his sword, this 1+1, 2 combined ninjutsu instantly unleashed a power unmatched by conventional ninjutsu. The entire water spout danced wildly in the wind, swirling furiously. It engulfed the 12 wind masses in one gulp, crushing them, transforming them into its own power, spinning with even greater violence and force. Then, Uchiha Chi's face was grim, his teeth clenched, his body strained to the limit. He yanked furiously at the Kusanagi sword, pulling it back with one thrust, dragging the water spout along with him, and smashing it down at his feet. Boom! The water spout crashed into the ground, instantly crushing it into slag, sending up a cloud of dust. Like the mythical wind god who controls storms, Uchiha Chi, using the immense force of his sword, leaped high into the air. The sword in his hand seemed like a rocket propeller, the violent wind force propelling him hundreds of meters into the air, like a meteor hurtling against the heavens. Uchiha Chi, he had actually launched himself. In a flash, the young man flew over 50 meters, soaring over the core of the Sunagakure camp. Below, the Sunagakure stood stunned, their scalps tingling as they watched the young man descend from the sky. Holy crap, what the hell is that, so fast, damn it. How can that kid fly, sir? It's too fast, there's no way I can aim. What's he going to do? Under the stunned gaze of the Sunagakure, Uchiha Chi, who had soared into the air and dispersed the hurricane's water vortex, sneered with a fierce expression. Did you guys enjoy shooting just now? Now, his eyes darkened, and he raised his Kusanagi sword high. One arm instantly ignited, the light so bright it looked like a small sun. It's my turn, in an instant. Fire style, chakra mode, zero tail, dark chakra mode, forbidden technique, flesh transformation, and immortality were all activated. Uchiha Chi swung his sword downward, aiming at the Sunagakure camp. He opened his mouth and spit out a layer of wind-style super vacuum blade on the burning sword, making the flames even more violent. Then, this long sword, so brilliant that it was impossible to look directly at it, burst out with a terrifying flame. Below, the Sand Village commander widened his eyes and shouted urgently, "Oh no, this kid is going to use that trick again. Quick, let's use wind-style super Kimaitachi technique together to blow him away." The Sand Village looked at the suddenly rising sun in the sky with horror on their faces and immediately began to form hand seals. However, Uchiha Chi looked down at the ground with contempt and laughed wildly. Too late. Besides, I am completely different from the me just now. He aimed a blazing Kusanagi sword at the Sand Village position below, gritted his teeth, and surged his chakra. Everything he had was poured into the sword. Then, Uchiha Chi's eyes widened, and he roared, "Watch this, shoot the greatsword, flame wind dragon dance." In the next instant, raging flames, fueled by the violent wind, perfectly replicated the combination ninjutsu Kokuzu had once used before him, strange face explosion. Flame wind waves. Unlike the slow process of building the flowing flame greatsword, a lifelike fire dragon instantly emerged from the Kusanagi sword. Its scales were made of wind, its tendons were made of earth wrath silk, and its bones were made of the flowing flame of fire release, chakra mode. Almost instantly, the fire dragon, braving the wind, expanded to a massive height of nearly 50 meters. It circled in midair, its eyes blazing with rays as bright as the sun, ruthlessly surveying the creatures below. The next moment, it launched with a bang. It pounced upon the ground and bit. Below, a group of sand villagers raised their heads in a daze, looking up at the fire dragon that seemed to have flown out from a myth. The speed of forming hand seals slowed down by half a beat, as if they saw the six-path sage smiling and waving at them. Chapter 139, A Tragic Victory, A Near-Death Crisis. After unleashing the massive fire dragon, the Kusanagi sword instantly lost its luster, and along with it, Uchiha Chi's ki-rin arm dimmed. His entire right arm was reduced to a heap of charcoal. The zero tail in his abdomen was completely drained, and even his original body suddenly shrank significantly. Accordingly, the forbidden technique, flesh transformation, also ceased immediately. For a moment, Uchiha Chi felt his eyelids drooping with sleep. Without the power of the forbidden technique, his injuries erupted instantly. The piercing wounds from the fierce battle against the Sands village siege, the muscle strains from dragging the hurricane water tornado, the stinging pain of his right arm burning to charcoal, the various non-fatal knife and sword wounds that hadn't been repaired immediately to conserve chakra, and the intense exhaustion from overdrawn chakra. It hurt so much. The agony made it impossible for him to close his eyes, and he could only watch helplessly as he plummeted from 100 meters in the air. And at such a cost, he unleashed his ultimate technique, shooting greatsword, flame wind dragon dance. Almost instantly, the fire dragon descended from the sky, slamming headfirst into the stunned Sands village. Even before it touched the ground, the very vegetation, insects, and rocks across the Gobi Desert began to tremble. Vultures flapped their wings and soared high, antelopes looked up in fear, lions, leopards, sand rabbits, countless animals all raised their heads, then instantly began to flee in panic. Uchiha Chi calmly surveyed the scene from the night sky, glancing back at the elite Sands village warriors at the center of the fire dragon's impact. He suddenly smiled, like a child with a new toy. Then, with a slight opening of his mouth, he uttered a deadly final cry to commemorate his masterpiece. Bang! The fire dragon slammed down upon the Sands village warriors standing in the center of the camp. Unwilling to sit still, their heads raised, their eyes bulging, they unleashed all their most powerful techniques into the sky. Countless ninjutsu fused, coalescing into a ball of white light that thundered skyward. The fire dragon and the white ball collided instantly. Squeak, 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 the distorted, eerie cry of the air explosion nearly shattered one's eardrums. The next moment, bang! A brilliant, dark red mushroom cloud rose from the ground. Instantly swallowing all light and sound, the violent aftermath caused the air to vibrate, and a visible, twisted ring of air spread out in all directions, blowing everything away, vaporizing, evaporating, and destroying it, until it collided with a pale red death battle barrier covering a 300-meter radius. Crack! 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 Dense spider webs appeared above the barrier, and the aftermath alone possessed a terrifying attack power comparable to that of a shadow. After a sound like shattering glass, the death battle barrier exploded with a bang. A violent wind instantly spread out, forcing all members of the Konoha surprise attack force standing outside the barrier to lean back and shield their faces from the wind. Finally, a long, eerie silence descended. When they finally opened their eyes, the members of the surprise attack force immediately looked up toward the Tsunagakure position. The next moment, everyone gasped, their eyes fixed on the ruins, their eyes fixed in awe. A 12-year-old chunin could unleash such a move. How could anyone survive this blow? Captain, what did you just say? You wanted to save that brat. Who's going to save whom in this situation? Uchiha Shinichi and Uchiha Shisui stood side by side in the front row, staring blankly at the center of the battlefield. This absurd reality completely shattered their understanding of the ninja world. Although Uchiha Shisui didn't want to boast, he had been known as a genius since childhood. Everyone in the clan who met him would praise him for his promising young talent and his future. Even for a genius like him, he had only recently awakened his Sharingan and possessed only two Magatama, capable of fighting evenly with the clan's Jonin. But, that boy, Uchiha Chi, what the hell was this guy? The last time I saw him, he was still picking up bottles and scrap from the Konoha village river, doing D-rank tasks that everyone in the clan despised. A worthless genin who'd spit at a passing dog, a worthless genin who couldn't even open his Sharingan. And now, this guy, carrying a sack and picking up bottles, the waste in the eyes of whose clan, had suddenly become the beloved disciple of the Sannin, earning a huge reputation in the land of hot water. Now, he single-handedly fought off 300 Sands village soldiers. First, he beheaded an enemy with his piercing sword, then, dancing under the moonlight, he stormed into the enemy camp, his sword sweeping the universe as he soared into the air, his radiant dragon fire shattering the enemy formation with a single blow. It was simply terrifying. Compared to this, Shisui felt like his reputation as a genius was just self-proclaimed boasting in front of him, and he felt ashamed. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Uchiha Shinichi stared blankly at the ruins with his Sharingan, muttering, how can he be so strong? Swordsmanship, physical skills, illusion skills, and even ninjutsu, he has surpassed me in all aspects. He is so strong, what else can I teach him? I understand. Uchiha Shinichi suddenly raised his head with a look of realization, as if he suddenly figured something out. His face was angry, full of envy and jealousy. He clenched his fist and hit his thigh. Damn it. This is the Eagle faction showing off to us. The Great Elder is picking me. Since the death of the previous clan leader Uchiha Kagami, the position of the clan leader of the Uchiha clan has been vacant. It was originally planned that the strongest clan leader Uchiha Fugaku would succeed him, but the Great Elder Uchiha Setsuna did not know why he kept insisting on not agreeing. In the end, Fugaku could only become the captain of the police department, and be considered the young clan leader. Fugaku's appointment as chief of the police force was a direct result of the unanimous support of his own Uchiha neutral faction and their Dove faction. Now, a rising star has suddenly emerged from the Hawk faction, and Uchiha Setsuna has invited him to the Land of Rain, right before the Dove faction, and even asked one of their leaders to teach him. What's the point? Is he trying to show off his power, or is he trying to get the Doves to recognize this brat? And then, make him the next clan leader? Uchiha Shinichi's expression was filled with confusion, his thoughts racing. Fugaku's previous dismal performance in the Land of Hot Water had already resented many within the clan, and now this brat had done something so completely unbelievable. Both in terms of strength and the support of the powerful. This brat certainly had the credentials to compete with Fugaku and become clan leader of the Uchiha clan. With a complex expression, Uchiha Shinichi looked up at the brat who had done all this to save them. For a moment, he didn't know how to object to such a thing. Deep down, he even harbored a faint anticipation. If this child became the head of the Uchiha clan, what path would he lead them on? However, just then, Shisui's cry from the side snapped his thoughts back to reality. Brother Shinichi, look, over there, Uchiha Chi is in danger. Uchiha Shinichi suddenly looked up, gazing towards the center of the Sunagakure camp. There, amidst the desolate ruins, crystallized by the moment the fire dragon struck, a trembling figure pushed aside the corpses on his back and climbed to his feet. It was the commanding genin of the Sunagakure camp. Covered in burns, he stared blankly around. Within a 50-meter radius, aside from the 3 elite squads he had just dispatched to stop the snakes, he was the only one still alive. Beyond the battlefield resisting the snakes, the Sunagakure Midden genin further away had cowered in fear like quails, completely losing their fighting spirit. This single blow wiped out half of Sunagakure's forces. The devastated ruins, the blood-stained crystallized earth, the melting kunai transformed into molten iron and charred stones, the severing limbs and arms pierced by wind blades, these scenes painted a picture of despair and hunger. It struck him deeply, his eyes widening, his features horrified with shock, fear, a glazed expression, and a shimmer of utter despair and madness. Then, with a dry twist of his head, he saw the culprit behind all this. The young man sprawled amidst the rubble, his legs broken from the impact, his right arm charred to charcoal, his neck bent at a strange angle, his body awash in burns, knife wounds, and sword lacerations. Only a faint breath gave him the faintest sign of life. The Uchiha clan's executioner. The Sand Village genin's breathing stagnated. His eyes suddenly bulged out, his trembling teeth clenched tightly, and a murderous look filled with madness rose in his eyes. He stood up suddenly and pulled out a kunai with a flashing cold edge from his ninja tool bag. You, walking through the night and the desolate wilderness, the last Sand Village ninja roared, shedding a line of blood and tears, and charged at the boy who had completely lost his ability to resist. You devil, die. Chapter 140 Desperate Game, Fire in the Hole. Lying prone on the ruined ground, Uchiha Chi struggled to raise his now immobilized head, helplessly staring at the charging Sand Village genin. His face was a picture of panic and shock, as if he hadn't expected the Sand Village genin to be alive. Seeing this expression on Uchiha Chi's face, Sand Village genin Ryusa couldn't help but laugh grimly. Ha, you evil Uchiha brat, today, I will personally end your life. Ryusa felt quite wronged. For him, this should have been a smooth encirclement and suppression mission, but it hadn't been met with such a twist. And judging by the brat's attire, it was clear he wasn't even a genin. 300 of them, Sand Village, had fought one man, only to be nearly annihilated. As the commander, he bore the brunt of this guilt. His future was ruined, and upon returning to the village, he would face endless accusations. Even if he tried to defend himself, to beg for mercy, to claim this Uchiha was incredibly powerful, who would believe him? How could an Uchiha, barely a genin, defeat their entire Sands Village army like this? This was simply unbelievable. At this moment, Ryu's predicament resembled the future of the 7 ninja swordsmen of Kirigakure, who stormed into the land of fire only to be nearly annihilated by a passing figure in a green tights and thick eyebrows. With the exception of the loyal and well-connected Zigguish and Pufferfish, who returned to Kirigakure, the others, without a word, had defected. With the Wind Country's daimyo imminently slashing military spending, the Sand Village was left with no choice but to risk its future war with Konoha. If he returned in such a crushing defeat, with nothing to take back, Ryuso would be left with a situation he absolutely refused to face. With this thought in mind, Ryuso glared furiously, lunged forward, and lunged, ready to plunge a kunai through Uchiha Chi's throat. At that moment, Uchiha Chi, sprawled on the ground, his expression suddenly changed. All traces of panic and helplessness vanished, and he instantly shed all pretense, revealing a ferocious expression. He raised his left hand, the only thing still able to move, and pointed it at the Tsunagakure. Because his throat was severed and he couldn't speak properly, he could only roar in anger. Ho! Longsha was startled, expecting the other party to unleash some desperate tactic. But the next moment, nothing happened. Longsha suddenly felt that the imp before him had become somewhat kind, and even felt a little reluctant to kill him. But the thought was fleeting, replaced by anger and fear. And now, Uchiha Chi had already obtained what he wanted. In this desperate situation, no matter how many methods he had to survive, without chakra, they were all wishful thinking. He could only desperately squeeze Zero Tail, absorbing the opponent's dark emotions and converting them into dark chakra. Then, the dark chakra that poured into his body briefly activated the forbidden technique, flesh transformation, providing a glimmer of life to the body. Uchiha Chi immediately refined this life force into his own chakra, repairing the most vulnerable wound on his body, his broken neck, in the process, restoring a modicum of mobility to his near-collapsed body. He immediately bit down on the hilt of the Kusanagi sword, saliva mingling with blood. Supporting himself with one hand, he thrust his hips into a handstand, twisting his fingers into the ground to propel himself upward. Raising his head, he bit the Kusanagi sword and swung it upward, blocking the kunai thrust from the Tsunagakure genin. At this moment, he couldn't afford to be injured again. If he were to be injured again, if he were to lose his mobility again, his healing speed wouldn't match the damage. Even if he managed to survive, it would be a horrible fate. But the strike was too weak. With just a slight push from Longsha, Uchiha Chi was sent flying backwards, collapsing on the ground in a cloud of sand. Ryu's eyes flashed with shock, a moment of daze. He couldn't understand how, even with such injuries, this guy could still fight. This daze was actually due to the Zero Tail absorbing his emotions during this process. Regaining a bit of chakra, Uchiha Chi crouched on the ground, biting the hilt of the Kusanagi sword, and painedly straightened and repaired his broken right leg. Ouch! The pain made Uchiha Chi's eyes widen, sweat pouring down his forehead. He gritted his teeth and let out a painful groan, biting the hilt of the sword. Meanwhile, Ryusa had recovered and rushed forward again. Uchiha Chi immediately released the Kusanagi sword, took it in his left hand, and stood up, leaning on the sword. He twisted his foot and slashed back, this time with his right leg as support. He blocked the opponent's attack with even greater ease. But with such a high-quality power bank in front of him, how could Uchiha Chi let him go? He immediately feigned defeat, letting himself be swiftly struck back, quietly repairing his left leg in the process. And so, knocked down again and again, rising again and again. After sending Uchiha Chi flying for the 5th time, Ryusha finally realized something was amiss. Wasn't this brat practically dead? How come he seemed so energetic the more he fought? From a broken neck, a broken hand, a broken leg, to now looking like nothing had happened, this was bizarre. He even started to shout out his support, chanting, you're truly a formidable foe. I'm dying, one more hit, and I'm really going to die, puff. That was a close call. I almost got stabbed in the heart. The thought of this sent Ryusha into another trance. He'd never been so lost in his life. Realizing something was amiss, Longsha leaped back a long way, his expression tense. Only then did his composure return. He frowned, carefully observing the distance between him and Uchiha Chi. 5 meters. Beyond this distance, the opponent's unique ability, which resembled a genjutsu, would have no effect on him. We can't engage in close combat. We'll finish him right here with wind style. He took a deep breath, staggered his steps, and leaped back a distance, forming hand seals. Seeing this, Uchiha Chi frowned slightly, somewhat surprised that the opponent had seen through his abilities so quickly. However, the chakra converted by Zero Tail wasn't enough to repair his charred right hand. Unable to form hand seals and perform ninjutsu, and without obstacles to shift with his silk thread, attempting to close in on a genin skilled in wind style was clearly unrealistic. It would be like charging across the Gobi Desert just now. He'd be forcibly repelled before even reaching him. Moreover, if the forbidden technique, flesh regeneration, couldn't sustain repairs, he might even be forcibly chopped apart by the enemy's wind style. When fighting reached this point, with chakra depleted, all that remained was calculation. Uchiha Chi narrowed his eyes and surveyed the battlefield. After a mental calculation, he glanced sideways at his charred right arm. He couldn't afford to repair it now, but fortunately, it could still be reused. He took a deep breath, grasped the Kusanagi sword in his left hand, and struck his heart with a hilt. The next moment, a violent surge of chakra surged through him. Without using the forbidden technique, flesh regeneration, to repair his body, Uchiha Chi immediately poured all his dark chakra into fire style, chakra mode. Instantly, a blazing flame erupted, converging on his right arm. Fire style, Kirin arm, ignited once more. Seeing this, Longsha across from him felt his scalp tingle and a chill run down his spine. Thinking back to the giant sword and fire dragon he'd just taken on, his mind was spinning, unable to comprehend a jutsu of this magnitude. How could this brat even use it again? His chakra, isn't it free? Damn it, Ryusa gritted his teeth, his hands rapidly forming hand seals. He suddenly leaned back, gathering his chakra in his throat. Uchiha Chi quietly flashed his Sharingan, but instead of rushing to draw his flowing flame greatsword, he fixed his gaze on the other man's impending wind style. The next moment, Ryusa leaned back and took a deep breath, his stomach, chest, and cheeks puffing out like a toad. Then, he suddenly exhaled. Wind style, super scale sand-dust breakthrough. This jutsu, a modified version of the one-tailed Shukaku's wind style, infinite sand-dust breakthrough, allows the caster to absorb the wind entirely into their body, causing it to swell and unleash a vast desert storm. However, because the human body cannot store the vast quantities of wind it can, forcing it to do so would damage the body. Therefore, this technique is considered a highly dangerous forbidden technique in the Sand Village. But at this moment, to avoid being slain by Uchiha Chi's sword, he had no choice but to risk his life to unleash this forbidden technique. However, upon seeing this, Uchiha Chi's glare was fierce, and he suddenly bared his teeth in a grin. Now, perfect opportunity, he immediately grasped the Kusanagi sword in his left hand, twisted it, and aimed it at himself. Gritting his teeth, he slashed down with all his might. With a swish, the Kusanagi sword, capable of slicing through iron like mud, instantly severed Uchiha Chi's right arm, which was blazing brightly and ablaze with flames. Uchiha Chi flung his hand, burying his Kusanagi sword in the rubble. His left hand grabbed hold of his falling right hand, which was gleaming with an extremely explosive light. He stared madly at the dragon sand, which was spewing a terrifying gust of wind, and laughed wildly through the pain, and during the excruciating pain, ha 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 ha, Sunagakure, watch out, this move is called, fire in the hole, boom. A violent wind surged up. Uchiha Chi raised his right arm high, then quietly released his grip in the wind. His right arm, blazing with a fiery light, was instantly swept up by the wind, soaring high into the sky and flying far away. And then, after a moment of extreme silence, suddenly, the entire battlefield shook again. Boom. And with this roar, it landed. It seemed as if something had been blown through. I just realized that after all this fighting, this extra character still doesn't have a name. Let's give it a name. This character appears in the original manga, one of the 4 high-ranking members of Sunagakure during Gaara's generation. The 4 high-ranking members of Sunagakure are, Ryusa, Kyauga, Tsunagami, and Tishi. Ryusa, 41, currently in his 20s, a long-time leader who has supported the village. He is slightly younger, with a broad chin. He is very cautious about his words and actions, and only acts after making calm judgments. Please support me with your monthly votes. Chapter 141, Roar. Changes. 10,000 snakes devour the master. A raging wind blew a seemingly endless cloud of sand and dust backward. Grass, gravel, rocks, even the deeply rooted, charred red willows were uprooted. Wind style, infinite sand dust, a major breakthrough. Unleashed by the one-tailed Shukaku, this technique could reach a radius of several kilometers. In Longsha's hands, this refined forbidden technique instantly destroyed everything in sight. Even Uchiha Chi couldn't stop himself in the fierce wind, being dragged backwards, on the verge of being lifted high into the air. He could only squint with difficulty, and with his left hand, he drew a kunai and thrust it into the ground, his entire body draped in the kunai like a banner, floating backwards. His right arm, caught on the wind, instantly flew nearly 100 meters. With Uchiha Chi's precise calculations, he soared in front of the remaining Tsunagakure team, engaged in a fierce battle with the snakes. At this moment, the Sand Village ninjas were also unintentionally caught within the Dragon Sand's attack range. Seeing the oncoming gust of wind, they could only shield their faces with their arms. Suddenly, something so black and luminous it was blindingly bright drifted onto the wind. It was an arm resembling charcoal, cracking inch by inch, emitting a dazzling glow. The Sand Village ninjas were stunned by the sight. A Sand Village ninja instinctively sensed something was amiss and immediately unleashed a gust of wind-style air currents, attempting to blast away the seemingly abnormal object. However, the dark chakra that had been poured into the arm was burned, exploding with an eerie, charcoal-like sound. Following the fire-style chakra burning chakra chain reaction, it far exceeded the normal chakra-based energies. The fire-style chakra mode, which had completely consumed the dark chakra in its arm, was about to explode when it collided with a wind-style air dance. Immediately, this stream of flame spread outward, igniting the outer world. Combined with the chakra contained in the wind-style air dance blasted by the Sand Ninja, it enveloped dozens of teams, including the Mana Snakes. The wind style, the enemies, the Mana Snakes, and the chakra all began to burn together, until this power reached its peak. The next moment, boom. A sound even more terrifying than the one created by Uchiha Chi's earlier swing of the lethal greatsword, Flame Wind Dragon Dance, instantly exploded. Longsha and Uchiha Chi both turned their heads in shock. The night sky was instantly illuminated by a blazing white light, as bright as day. Then, the white light faded slightly, revealing a terrifying fiery mushroom cloud beneath, connecting heaven and earth. It was as if even the sky had been burned through with a massive hole. This power was even more terrifying than the scene created by Uchiha Chi's previous fire dragon strike. Even Deidara would have praised it as art. Observing the scene before him, Longsha's eyes suddenly widened, bloodshot, his expression vacant, his teeth clenched so tightly they practically burst through his gums. What the hell is that? Damn it! 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 What the hell have you done, you demon? Demon! Demon! He slumped to his knees, his head twisted and roared at Uchiha Chi with a shrill, twisted voice. Right before him, his men were nearly annihilated by his wind style. Now, of the 300 men, only a sparse 10 remained. In the area of the explosion, nothing but the corpse of a gigantic purple snake lay quietly. Nothing left. I caused this. Uchiha Chi stared in disbelief as he gazed at the mushroom cloud rising from the ground. He had mercy on his heart. Having used fire-style chakra mode so many times, he was well aware of the power generated by the amount of chakra. Uchiha Chi had originally expected the grenade to be only barely powerful enough to disperse the squad sent by Ryusa to stop Manja, perhaps opening a gap in the Sands Village formation, freeing Manja and securing victory for him. He had never expected that the final grenade would actually secure victory, but in such a horrific manner. Uchiha Chi was stunned. Fire-style chakra mode could actually have such an effect? Not only did it burn its own chakra, but it also burned the chakra of others. This was insane. Huh? Uchiha Chi exhaled, a slight grin forming on his face. Although he was still bewildered, still unable to comprehend the events that had caused the grenade to suddenly escalate into a miniature nuclear bomb, he had won. Moreover, on the battlefield, life and death are always in discernment. He felt no remorse for the death of these sand-hidden guards, his enemies. Longsha, standing nearby, saw Uchiha Chi smiling like that and flew into a rage. You evil Uchi! He leaped to his feet, forming hand seals and roaring furiously. But before he could finish his shout, a huge, Ferocious purple snake had suddenly burst forth from beneath the ground, its maw gaping. A chill ran down Longsha's spine. He glanced back, stunned. Wunsch, how did it get here? Wasn't it also killed by that brat's grenade? And its body was still there. Wunsch paid no heed to Diaxin's grievances. With a snap, its maw snapped shut, and it reared its massive head, swallowing Longsha whole, along with a chunk of gravel from the ground, in one gulp. Wunsch's throat throbbed and pounded, the sound of Longsha struggling within the Wunsch's jaws. As the snake twisted its body for a moment, the pressure within the cavity surged, and within 3 minutes, no sound emanated. This was precisely why Uchiha dared to declare victory. Through his Sharingan, he had long since spotted an unusual chakra wave beneath the ground, rapidly moving in that direction. It was the snake that had escaped from that devastating explosion using the snake shutting technique. When it all ended, a series of subtitles suddenly popped up before Uchiha's eyes. Dang, you bravely defeated Ryusa, the elite Jounin of Sans Village who attempted to kill you. You gained a random skill from him, wind style, high aperture cannon, B, proficient. Your counterattack was powerful, but the opponent was already dead, unable to retaliate, resulting in a critical hit, skill critical hit, current attribute, wind style, high aperture cannon, B+, proficient. Your heart steel level increased. Of course, there were also a bunch of subtitles popping up about the Sand Village being killed by grenades, as well as a whole bunch of newly released wind-style and earth-style jutsu, but those were irrelevant. Low-quality enemies wouldn't have any good skills. The only thing worth considering was this wind-style, high air cannon. This was a wind-style similar to high fireball, on the same level as Shimura Danzo's wind-style, vacuum big ball. The series of wind balls Ryusa and his team had just unleashed at him was this jutsu, quite effective and powerful. If Uchiha could master the technique of unleashing fire style with a single seal like Great Elder Uchiha Setsuna, this jutsu might be combined with high fireball to create an even more powerful combination jutsu, high wind fireball. After counting his haul, Uchiha let out a sigh of relief. He collapsed onto his back amidst the ruins with a thud, gazing up at the Milky Way, a galaxy of stars. The night wind drifted softly, and the clamor of the battlefield fell silent for a moment. His racing mind paused, leaving only a blank. By this point in the battle, he had exhausted all his strength, and now he truly had no chakra left. But at that moment, a sudden hissing sound, followed by the sound of a giant creature gliding across the ground, reached his ears. Wunsch's defiant and secretly angry voice suddenly rang out, "Little brat, you actually blew me up too. You even blew up all the sacrifices offered to me." Wunsch stretched out its head, and a shadow covering the sky and the sun covered him. It stared coldly at Uchiha who collapsed on the ground, and a murderous intent flashed in its snake pupils. Do you think you have lived too long?" Facing Wunsch's threatening remarks, Uchiha grinned with disdain, glanced at Wunsch coldly, and said lightly, "Stupid snake, do you want to offend me?" Wunsch stared at Uchiha dimly, and a humane sneer appeared on his snake face. "So what, you have no chakra now, right? That huge fire sword can't be used, and you don't have the chakra to activate the regeneration technique that Orochimaru taught you. You can't be my opponent now." The snakes suddenly glared, opened their bloody mouths in horror, and said coldly, "It's time to let you know who is the master." Hiss. Chapter 142 New Mission, Conquer the Battlefield. Uchiha lay expressionless on his back, staring at Mang Snake without a word. As Mang Snake had said, he was now completely depleted of chakra, making it impossible for him to defeat the snake before him. As the giant summoned beast of the three holy lands, Mang Snake was the strongest of the three terrors. At full power, it could even simultaneously suppress Tsunade's summoned slug and Jiraiya's summoned Gamabunta. Its relationship with its summoner was profoundly different from that of a typical summoned beast and its master. This giant summoned beast from the Raichi cave was notoriously arrogant and brutal. Every summon required a living sacrifice. It wouldn't even offer Orochimaru the benefit of the doubt, establishing a cooperative relationship between them. During the Sannin War, Mang Snake, seeing Orochimaru weakened by his sealed hands, even threatened him, and treated Kabuto Yakashi with disdain. Of course, after this, the petty-minded Kabuto Yakashi transformed it into the second-generation manga, the one that attacked Ryujima during the Fourth Shinobi World War. For this snake, turning against its master was as normal as eating and drinking. Not to mention that Uchiha not only refused to offer it as sacrifice, but also tried to take advantage of it for free, even resorting to outrageous behavior like whipping it with a 40-meter-long sword and using it as a shield. This was simply intolerable. In all its years as a manga, it had never encountered such a bold brat. However, after a round of battle with this brat and a hearty meal, manga, at this point, didn't actually want to kill Uchiha Chi. Between the two meals, it understood the importance of being full. If it wanted to strike, it would have done it long ago. There was no need for all this nonsense, right? In fact, it was more interested in bargaining. Manga was very bold. He stared at Uchiha Chi, thinking that he would scare the brat first, and then make his offer later, which would be a natural outcome. Hiss, is he going to ask this guy for 100 live sacrifices, or maybe more, like 150? Uchiha Chi knew in his heart that Manch probably didn't want to kill him at the moment, so he didn't give it any good looks. But wanting to benefit from him? Impossible. He himself was so poor that he was almost being kept by a rich woman, and he was so stingy even when buying a cake. How could he get sacrifices for Manch? Is this what a tough guy sent from heaven should do? If you have the guts, just eat me and let me take home 500 million and become the Dragon King. In short, it just shows that the barefoot are not afraid of the ones wearing shoes. Soon, in the center of a charred, bumpy battlefield, a snake and a man were staring at each other. Manch was waiting for Uchiha Chi to compromise, and Uchiha Chi was waiting for Manch to get out of here. Neither of them was willing to admit defeat first. The situation remained deadlocked for a moment, until a sudden rumbling of footsteps echoed, and a slightly childish voice shouted nervously, "Brother Shinichi, that snake looks like it's trying to eat C." An equally nervous voice quickly responded, "Shisui, I understand, Mingai, Itcher, follow me." The next moment, several shouts echoed simultaneously, "Beast Mimicry Ninjutsu, Yotongaya, Wind Style, Great Breakthrough, Fire Style, Great Fireball Jutsu." Uchiha Chi's eyelids couldn't help but flutter as these voices echoed. 3 men and a dog suddenly descended before him. Then, 3 ninjutsu erupted almost simultaneously, a fierce wind echoing with a raging fire, obscuring Manzo's vision. Then, 2 drill-like tornadoes shot out, striking Manzo's chin, sending its massive head careening backwards. Caught off guard, Man-Snake was struck hard. But before he could react, a towering figure leaped up, piercing through the sea of fire and wind, landing on Man-Snake's head. Suddenly, his eyes opened. A pair of crimson pupils, swirling with 3 Magatama, instantly met Man-Snake's gaze. "Damn it! It's the Sharingan, another damn Uchiha!" Hiss, Man-Snake cried out in shock, instinctively trying to close his eyes. But it was too late. Uchiha Shinichi stared intently at it, instantly activating his Sharingan illusion, temporarily restraining Man-Snake in place. Uchiha Chi, stunned, watched as Uchiha Shinichi, who had hypnotized Man-Snake, leaped down from the air. A hand patted Uchiha Chi's shoulder, followed by a scorching gaze. "See, are you okay?" Uchiha Shinichi instantly appeared beside Uchiha Chi and crouched down, his face filled with concern. He stared at Uchiha Chi, now the one-armed hero, and a flicker of astonishment crossed his eyes, a look of difficulty in accepting the truth, tinged with a deep sense of regret. For a normal ninja, losing an arm essentially spelled the end of their ninja career. And this brat, to save them, was willing to pay such a huge price by fighting 300 Sand Village warriors. This was simply. Uchiha Chi's brows twitched wildly, and he swallowed nervously as he saw Uchiha Shinichi's expression shift towards that of Uchiha Setsuna. He immediately forced himself to stand up, raised his left hand and patted the bleeding end of his right arm as if nothing had happened, and explained hurriedly, "Don't get me wrong, this can grow back by itself, it has nothing to do with you." "Huh?" Uchiha Shinichi was stunned, then raised his Sharingan to look at Uchiha Chi's right arm. Then he found that it was just as Uchiha Chi said, on his broken arm, with a continued effect of his immortal body, the granulation tissue was slowly wriggling and growing, and even the bone fragments were growing back a little silently. The whole process was quite slow. If he didn't have the Sharingan, he might not be able to see it at such a slow repair speed. That's good, Uchiha Shinichi, though he didn't understand why, finally breathed a sigh of relief. "If you were gone, I don't know how I'd explain it to the great elder." He looked at Uchiha Chi with concern. After a moment's silence, he reluctantly admitted, "Kid, I admit you're strong, even stronger than me, but don't do such exaggerated things in the future." Uchiha Shinichi looked around solemnly, taking in the devastated battlefield ruins in the night breeze. He couldn't help but take a deep breath. This is truly too dangerous. At that moment, the Gobi Desert, bathed in the clear light of a full moon, was ablaze with wildfires. Everything on the battlefield was ablaze, heavy black smoke billowing toward the sky, scattering rubble and kunai piercing the ground. Flames danced, flickered, and swirled in the night sky, illuminating the horrific bodies lying beside the flames. Two massive explosions left craters across the Gobi Desert, a sight that sent shivers down one's spine and filled them with a chilling sense of dread. Uchiha Chi, the instigator of all this, watched the scene unfold with a sinking heart. Only now, upon seeing the ruins, did he understand the terrifying power he wielded. This was ninja, this was war. Once on the battlefield, there was no turning back. If he hadn't been here today, everyone around him would have died. Including Uchiha Shisui, including Uchiha Shinichi, including the entire Konoha surprise force. Uchiha Chi let out a deep breath, then glanced away, catching Shinichi's eye. He didn't answer, but instead looked away. As the Konoha surprise force arrived, the root ninja who had given them the orders followed. He was not far from Uchiha Chi, his gaze fixed on him with a frenzied intensity. Uchiha Chi was silent for a while, not knowing what to call him. Fortunately, this root ninja was very tactful. The moment their eyes met, he immediately stepped forward. He half knelt on the ground in front of Uchiha Chi, who was slumped on the ground, and stroked his chest with his hand. Lord Shiro, my name is Yi. Uchiha Chi was in a daze for a moment, then he remembered that he did have a nickname of Shiro in the root, and that the lord he was calling was for himself. He couldn't help but shook his head, looked at the other party with a serious expression, and asked in a deep voice, Yi, what exactly is Orochimaru's plan? Why did Aburame Ryoma send out such a signal? He raised his left hand, which was still able to move, and pointed at the drifting red smoke 10 miles away. He looked at the root ninja Yi wearing a red patterned bird head mask, and said coldly, you'd better not tell me. This is a false alarm made by Orochimaru to force me to go to the battlefield. Yi immediately lowered his head after hearing this, and said solemnly, Lord Shiro, Lord Orochimaru has already led the team to assassinate the 4th Hokage. I guarantee with my life that there will be no problems at the strategic level. I didn't know the mission 10 miles away was carried out by Lord Aburame Ryoma, but given Lord Orochimaru's decisiveness in strategic execution, if that red flare was fired, it could only mean. Yi paused, then spoke gravely. They truly faced a danger worthy of releasing a red flare. Uchiha Chi's brow furrowed at Yi's words. In his view, the root, in Danzo Shimura's hands, was nothing more than a troublemaker. From the outset, he subconsciously suspected that the release of red smoke by Aburame Ryoma, who was carrying out a mission 10 miles away, was a conspiracy between him and Orochimaru, designed to create a sense of danger and force him into battle. Perhaps Orochimaru was hiding somewhere, watching him, spying on him, waiting for his imminent death to quietly emerge and save the day. But these speculations, combined with the Tsunagakure's proactive attack, the signs that they seemed to have known about their movements and hiding places, and the continued absence of Orochimaru, gave him a sense of disharmony. Now, the words of Root Ninja B only confirmed the truth. At this moment, it wasn't Shimura Danzo who led the root on the battlefield, but Orochimaru. It was Cold Lord Orochimaru. At this time, on this battlefield, Orochimaru had reappeared as the decision-maker and commander. His demeanor was that of the Cold Lord who terrified nations, willing to sacrifice everything to achieve his goals. For the sake of the overall strategy, he had ruthlessly abandoned the surprise attack force as a pawn. For the sake of the overall strategy, he had personally risked his life to lead the assassination of the 4th Hokage. For the sake of the overall strategy, he could certainly disregard the life and death of his disciple, no matter how much he valued him. Having already gone this far, why couldn't he give up on his colleague, Aburame Ryoma? Uchiha Chi took a deep breath, frowned, and pondered for a moment. He immediately looked up at Root Ninja B and asked, did Orochimaru tell me what my mission would be after we destroyed the 300 Sands village troops? Of course. Upon hearing this, B immediately raised his head and gazed deeply at Uchiha Chi, saying solemnly, Orochimaru-sama asked me to tell you, if you truly achieve victory, as a reward, this Konoha surprise force you see before you will be under your command. Then, according to your wishes, will you wreak havoc on this 3rd Shinobi World War? With that, Root Ninja B pulled a document from his bosom and presented it with both hands. Amidst the wildfire-spreading ruins, before the stunned gazes of all the Konoha Surprise Force members, he shouted respectfully, the Konoha Surprise Force, the entire team, We'll follow you, roam the battlefield. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143 I will launch a surprise attack alone. With a root ninja's shout, everyone's eyes instantly focused on the document in his hand. Seeing the official signatures and seals of many of Konoha's top brass, they were all stunned. This little Uchiha brat was supposed to lead their surprise attack force? He was only 12, wasn't he? Konoha's most talented young ninja, Hokage Kakashi, was still only a chunin, currently serving as a handyman under Minato Namikaze. And Uchiha Chi was actually going to lead an entire unit? For a moment, everyone stared at him in astonishment, wondering if they were dreaming. Of course, after witnessing the young man's heroic display on the battlefield, they had no objections to this decision. Not even the stubborn Uchiha members of the unit had any objections. On the contrary, in the chaotic, blood-spattering battlefield of the Rain Country, a meat grinder of blood and blood, with such a powerful leader, their chances of survival would be greatly increased. Thinking of this, everyone looked at Uchiha Chi with a flicker of hope, hoping that this young man would accept the assignment. Under the gaze of everyone, Uchiha Chi was also somewhat dumbfounded. He had expected Orochimaru to give him free rein, but he had never imagined that Orochimaru would be so bold as to hand the command of an entire army into his hands. To a mere 12-year-old chunin? Uchiha Chi instinctively wanted to refuse. What a joke. What the hell does he know about command? Command is no joke, and it's not about having this army just stand there cheering for him like he just did. These are real lives, living people on the same side. As a commander, intelligence, coordination, offense, defense, and so many other aspects are at stake. If any one of them is not done well, it could very well lead to their entire existence. He looked up, about to refuse, when he met the expectant gazes of the people around him. Those glances were complex: uneasiness, uncertainty, fear, and the realization born of a clear self-examination. But even more than that, trust. There was no reasoning behind it, it was simply the kind of absolute trust that, at first glance, said, "I'm certain you can lead me to victory." Uchiha Chi couldn't describe the feeling. Under the gaze of the entire Konoha surprise attack force, a familiar line from a woman popped into his mind: "I never wanted to be a leader. I fight, and they follow." The feeling of carrying a heavy burden is like 1,000 people hanging on your every word. They're waiting for me to speak. What should I say? The words of refusal came to his lips, but under such gazes, Uchiha Chi swallowed them back for some reason. Yes, what should he say now? Was he going to fight alone again? Knowing the enemy was a supreme expert capable of forcing a Urain Ryoma to fire a red flare, and with his own chakra depleted, unable to defeat even a foolish snake, the odds were so vast that at this critical moment, every bit of strength was precious. Could he truly refuse this gift with a price tag? Uchiha Chi fell silent. In his current state, rushing to Urain Ryoma's aid was impossible. To save them, to join the battle, to turn the tide of the war, he had to shoulder the lives of these people, their expectations, their fate. With this gift before him, as long as he continued to fight, he couldn't refuse. But shouldering their expectations, personally commanding them to fight and die in this meat grinder battlefield, conflicted with his desire to die alone. Wildfires blazed in the night breeze, smoke drifted beneath the starlight. In the center of a desolate battlefield, 90 ninjas from the surprise attack unit waited eagerly, surrounding Uchiha Chi, eagerly anticipating his appointment, eagerly awaiting every word from the young commander. Finally, Uchiha Chi opened his dark eyes under their gaze. He took a deep breath, then, with the help of Uchiha Shinichi and Shisui, struggled to his feet. Then, he raised his remaining left hand, took the appointment document, and held it high. This single gesture stirred the hearts of the entire surprise attack unit, causing a burst of joy to rise in their eyes. Uchiha Chi faced the crowd, his eyes deep, and his voice said, "Everyone, in this third Shinobi World War, in this action against Sand Village, we are abandoned pawns, abandoned existences. We are bait deliberately fed to Sand Village." But, Uchiha Chi pointed to the battlefield that he had turned into ruins, and shouted, "If the Sand Village troops in front of us are compared to the Dragon Gate, then at this moment, we have crossed the Dragon Gate and turned into fish dragons. From now on, We will be the real surprise attack force." He looked around and analyzed in a deep voice. Now the front battlefield is in the midst of fierce fighting, the side battlefield mission is facing failure, and the life and death of the core mission team is unknown. There is an intelligence leak inside, and the situation has fallen into the control of the enemy. The Sand Village army is invading from outside, and the wolf ambitions of various countries are obvious, trying to invade our homes. Now is the time of internal and external troubles, and life and death. The only thing we can be sure of is that only we have won a great victory. I have understood all the meaning of my standing here. Uchiha Chi's eyes darkened, and he fiercely raised his arm. Holding the document, he pointed toward the edge of the desert, where red smoke drifted 10 miles away. He roared, "Then, from now on, I will command the Konoha surprise attack force, to carry out a true surprise attack." With those words, the eyes of all the Konoha surprise attack force lit up, and they gazed eagerly at Uchiha Chi. "Oh," they all responded in unison, their demeanor straightened, their faces radiant as if they had been force-fed a shot of adrenaline. The initial bewilderment they had felt upon learning of their predicament vanished quietly after Uchiha Chi's words. Indeed, just as Uchiha Chi had said, with a battlefield in ruins on all sides, they, acting as bait, were the only unit to have achieved victory. Though this victory was brought about by the young man before them, what could be more inspiring than the insane act of one man forcibly suppressing 300 men? Even Uchiha Shinichi, who was supporting Uchiha Chi, blushed a little, eager to let out a wild cry and follow Uchiha Chi to witness what a true surprise attack truly was. However, as the members of the surprise attack force reveled in their excitement, their blood boiling at Uchiha Chi's words, and amidst the jubilation, Uchiha Shisui, standing to Uchiha Chi's right and supporting him, suddenly felt his eyelids twitch. Shisui suddenly realized that this scene seemed familiar, and the tone felt so familiar. And what did Uchiha Chi mean by "I'll carry out a true surprise attack"? Shouldn't the term "we" be used to describe the unit's mission? Uchiha Shisui suddenly looked up, a sense of unease, and glanced sideways in surprise. At that moment, Uchiha Chi stood in the center of the exultant crowd, gazing at their high-spirited eyes and smiling as he nodded. The next moment, he clenched the document tightly, raised his left hand high, and shouted, "Everyone, listen." With that command, the entire Konoha surprise force instantly stood upright, looking up at the young man at the center of the battlefield. They shouted, "Oh!" The sound was so resonant that even the crows in the sky, drawn by the smell of flesh and blood, started down. Uchiha Chi looked at everyone solemnly, as if about to issue an important mission. For a moment, silence fell, the atmosphere oppressive. Everyone swallowed, looking solemnly at the young man before them. Then, he shouted in a serious tone, "All members of the Konoha surprise force, led by Uchiha Shinichi, pack your bags and return to Konoha's main camp by the same route." Uchiha Chi paused, and as everyone stared in astonishment, wondering if they had misheard, he clenched his left fist and pounded it against his heart. He promised in a deep voice, "This mission, I will lead the surprise attack alone." Chapter 144, Face the Reality, Shisui explodes. Silence dominated tonight's battlefield. All the ninjas in the surprise attack force stared in astonishment at the young man who had spoken. "You're kidding? I admit you have some talent, kid, but you're a bit too arrogant, asshole. What do you mean you're launching a surprise attack all by yourself?" Everyone present was stunned, then erupted in curses and rebukes. "You've got everyone excited, and now you say you're going alone, leaving us to pack up and go home?" Uchiha Chi had anticipated this scenario and immediately raised his hand to quell the clamor. There was a kind of disdain inherited from the Uchiha ancestors in his eyes, and he looked down on everyone and shouted, "That's right, I want to go alone, you bunch of trash will only drag me down." On the side, Uchiha Shinichi immediately stood up, stood in front of Uchiha Chi, and shouted angrily, "What did you say, Uchiha Chi? Don't be too arrogant." "Arrogant?" Uchiha Chi chuckled, and looked at Uchiha Shinichi calmly with a pair of black pupils, and said coldly, as the Uchiha's Jonin, "Uchiha Shinichi, others don't know it, don't you know it? Don't you know how big the gap is between the masters of the ninja world and ordinary ninjas?" Uchiha Chi looked down at the people below coldly, swung his left arm brazenly, pointed at the red beacon, and shouted angrily, "I know, precisely because I know, I can't let you go. I'm not afraid to tell you that the person carrying out the mission there is my boss, Aburame Ryoma. He alone can kill all the members of your surprise attack force, and the existence that can force Aburame Ryoma to send out red flares, that must be a supermaster that ordinary ninjas cannot deal with, or even die if they get close to him." Uchiha exhaled deeply, looked at the people who lost their voices in an instant, and was silent for a moment. As a commander, I hope you can live well, and don't die for meaningless goals. This world is so realistic, people with power will inadvertently ignore the weight of life. If they rush forward in a swarm, they will be instantly defeated like leeks being cut. The truly naive people are such fools who cannot recognize the reality. If you are impatient, the more you want to get something, the more you will lose it. Life, ideals, friendship, family, love, everything, will be after a roar. The curtain falls. He looked at the crowd heavily, raised his hand to point to the ruins he blasted out, spread his palm, and slashed across his body. He coldly rebuked, could it be, wasn't what I just proved enough? Gazing at the ruins before them, and responding to Uchiha's awe-inspiring words, everyone subconsciously swallowed. Faced with such godlike might, the oppressive force of a 40-meter-long sword, the despair of a 50-meter-long fire dragon's bite, and that earth-shattering explosion. If one were to place themselves in the shoes of the charging Tsunagakure, one would understand the sheer force of Uchiha's words. A momentary silence descended upon the scene. With reality exposed, hypocrisy shattered, all that remained was powerlessness. But then, no, a firm, childish voice rang out, causing everyone to look up. It was Uchiha Shisui, a member of C's same clan. He stood before them, beside Uchiha. He stared coldly at the young man beside him, then decisively released his grip. The next moment, "Hey, Shisui, what are you doing?" Uchiha was suddenly startled, his entire body losing its support and collapsing to the ground, slamming heavily onto the rubble. A cloud of dust rose up, and after struggling for several seconds, he couldn't even get up. This scene shocked everyone. Was this still the young genius who had just stalked the battlefield with a single sword, like a dragon? How could he be so weak now? Uchiha Shisui gritted his teeth, his eyes reddening as if tears were about to fall. He looked down at the other man and shouted angrily, "I knew it, you idiot, you're going to do it again, again and again, again and again. Are you going to show off like this? Do you see clearly? This is you now, so powerless that you're crawling on the ground, as weak and powerless as a worm. You talk so much trash, but what's your reality?" Uchiha Shisui suddenly pulled out his wakizashi and swung it, nailing Uchiha between his legs, causing him to jump back in shock. Uchiha dropped as he stared at the trembling blade stuck in the ground. He could still feel a chill on his crotch. He had almost said goodbye to his second brother. He raised his head, swallowed his saliva, and looked at Shisui, who suddenly burst into emotion. He wondered what was wrong with his little cousin. Uchiha Shisui suddenly raised his head and exposed him in a cold voice. "I know what you want to do, I know what you are thinking, Uchiha. You must take on this identity, you must carry the number of Konoha's surprise attack force and rush to the death, you must prove that we have been here, take on the most dangerous task for us, take the blame for the failure of the task, and then give the reputation and credit to the living. You must use your life to build a bridge between the clan and the village, just like my ancestor Uchiha Kagami." Uchiha Shisui trembled all over, his eyes were red, and he stared at Uchiha seriously. He suddenly jumped up and rode up, punched Uchiha in the face, and roared angrily, "What a joke, you said we were childish." Shisui grabbed Uchiha's tattered collar, and a line of tears shed. With a crying voice, he shouted angrily, "The real childish person is obviously you." Uchiha blinked, his pupils suddenly trembling as he stared at Uchiha Shisui, who was so close to him, with a look of shock on his face. Oh my god. Uchiha swore he hadn't thought that much. This, charging with a number, taking the blame, being awarded credit, and being a bridge between the clan and the village? Damn it. He just thought that this tough guy who dropped from the sky wouldn't let the weak die for him, and he certainly wouldn't sit idly by and watch his friends fall into trouble. With these two things in mind, he was determined to save Urame Ryoma without hesitation. Success or failure wouldn't be a loss, after all, he had insurance. It just so happened that his teacher, Orochimaru, had really gone back to his career. This time, no one could bring him back to life. But Shisui, this little brother, had such a rich inner drama that he had even written a series of righteous and awe-inspiring scripts for him. You, Uchiha's lips trembled as he stared at Uchiha Shisui, his face trembling wildly. He felt like lashing out, but his little cousin was crying and fussing, his eyes as stubborn as a stubborn donkey. He was held captive by such a clear, earnest gaze, and for a moment, he was speechless. This scene, in front of everyone's eyes, instantly made it seem as if Shisui's words had completely exposed Uchiha Chi, leaving him unable to refute and only able to stammer. In other words, Shisui was right. Suddenly, everyone looked at Uchiha Chi with sudden realization. So that's it. So that's it. This brat was spouting all these lies, actually, just to save them. And he was actually willing to trade his life for theirs. He was dragging a crippled body that a 3-year-old could knock down with a single punch, just to pave a way for them. And he wanted to take the blame for the mission's failure, leaving them with the hope of survival and the credit for their efforts. This. As soon as this thought reached them, the gazes of everyone present towards Uchiha Chi began to subtly shift. Chapter 145, divide the troops into 3 groups and rush to support. For a moment, no one spoke on the field. The stars drifted slowly across the sky, reflecting the Milky Way in a breathtaking display of beauty. Uchiha Chi hissed in pain as Shisui, in full view of the crowd, pounded him with a barrage of blows. The pain of being utterly humiliated by Shisui, who had been so arrogant and domineering one moment, felt like he had truly been hurt. And it was a truly devastating blow. Uchiha Chi couldn't help but raise his elbows to cover his face. Gathering a bit of strength, he was about to push Shisui away, attempting to restore his shattered image of strength with a few words. But then, after a period of silence and deep thought, Uchiha Shinichi, who had been gazing at Uchiha Chi with a complex gaze, suddenly took a large step forward, took a deep breath, and declared solemnly, "I understand." At that, Uchiha Chi's breathing hitched again, his expression froze. Good. Shisui is still young, so it's okay if he's just sick. What's wrong with you, big brother? What the hell do you understand? Damn it. When Uchiha thinks, even God would laugh. At this time, Uchiha Shinichi turned around, faced everyone, and spoke solemnly, "Everyone." Although what this stupid brat said was unpleasant, Uchiha Shinichi spoke so calmly to everyone, but, he is right. Hearing this, the entire army was immediately in an uproar. Even the squadron leader Ichiji couldn't help but frown and stepped forward to question, "Captain, how could you?" However, Uchiha Shinichi raised his hand to interrupt Ichiji's questioning, and said solemnly, "Listen, there are also differences between genin. In the face of true power, numbers have lost their due effect." But, he looked at everyone with a sincere and warm gaze. "This is not to belittle us, nor is it a reason to make us unreasonably discouraged and feel despair. When we set foot on this battlefield, when Kune rained down from the sky, when the crisscrossing ninja ways glimpsed the destined ending, each of us has his own place to stand. This stupid brat can't speak. I apologize to you all on his behalf, but I believe everyone can sense the wishes he wishes to express, his hope that everyone can reunite in the village alive." After saying this, Uchiha Shinichi suddenly bent down in front of everyone and bowed in apology. Seeing this, everyone looked at him in disbelief. This Uchiha brat could actually make the always arrogant and contemptuous Uchiha Shinichi bow down and apologize on his behalf. This situation was completely unimaginable. After this astonishing bow, everyone fell silent for a moment, quietly awaiting Uchiha Shinichi's next words. When Uchiha Shinichi raised his head again, his gaze suddenly sharpened. He looked down at the group, took a deep breath, and said in a deep voice, "So, now, I'll start assigning everyone's tasks." Uchiha Shinichi raised his hand and pointed at the red smoke drifting 10 miles away, drawing everyone's attention. "First, confirm that the enemy is a formidable target even a Birame Ryoma would find difficult. Too many people would inevitably lead to drag and meaningless sacrifices. Therefore, the surprise attack will continue, but it will be carried out by an elite team. Inuzuka Akira, Uchiha Shisui, and this brat will carry out the mission." Hearing this, Uchiha Chi frowned, propped himself up from the ground, and shouted angrily, "Wait, Shinichi, I'm the commander, tisk." Uchiha Shinichi glanced at him disdainfully, his eyes gazing up and down at Uchiha Chi, who was trembling just standing with a broken arm. He shook his head and said calmly, "With your current condition, even if you were Hokage, you wouldn't be of any use." Uchiha Chi opened his mouth, speechless for a moment. What was he supposed to say? Should he just follow up with, "You'll regret this, Shinichi"? But the point was, I'm the commander of the surprise attack force. How could this Uchiha so confidently dismiss me as the commander? Hearing his name missing from the surprise attack team roster, the squadron leader, Ichiji, a genin, immediately asked anxiously, "Shinichi, what about me?" Uchiha Shinichi turned solemnly to look at him, slapped him on the shoulder, and told him to calm down. "Ichiji, You have a more important mission to accomplish." With that, he turned sideways to face the crowd. Under the gaze of the crowd, he pulled a map from the pouch at his waist, unfolded it, and hung it around the neck of Uchiha Chi, who was standing nearby. He then shouted, "Everyone, this battle is not just about raids, slaughter, and fighting. We should understand what we are fighting for." Uchiha Shinichi immediately slapped their spot on the map and solemnly analyzed. "Now, 300 Tsunagakure have been defeated here. A huge gap has appeared in the 4 Tsunagakure camps along the Rain Country front, and this gap was carved for us by this little brat, and what we need to do next is to expand our victory." Uchiha Chi, used as a human sign, staggered and angrily looked at Uchiha Shinichi. He was now completely certain that this birdman was indeed seeking revenge. However, there was nothing wrong with the other party's words. At the beginning of the Third Shinobi World War, the Wind and Fire Kingdoms deployed their forces in the Land of Rain. Their respective outposts were located at key points within the Land of Rain. Each was crucial, each one extremely difficult to capture from the front. But now, the situation had changed slightly. The surprise attack force was behind enemy lines, and most of the troops in the camp had been destroyed by Uchiha Chi's bombing. Seeing this, Uchiha Chi immediately realized that this was a perfect opportunity. Obviously, Uchiha Shinichi, who had been roaming in the Rain Country for many days, realized this even earlier than he did. He tilted his head solemnly and looked at Ichiji, one of the 3 genin of the surprise attack force, and solemnly instructed, "Ichiji, you take all the chunin in the force and go to destroy the Sands village camp, capture the remaining ninja in the camp, destroy the terrain here, and create a huge gap in the strategic depth. This will be a great achievement. With this as a breakthrough point, we may really be able to end this war quickly." Then, he looked back at the crowd and raised his hand to point in the direction they came from. "Also, all the genin of the surprise attack force, your mission is even more important, and it even concerns the lives of all of us." Uchiha Shinichi raised his finger and tapped heavily on the map, drawing a route. Then he solemnly said, "The fact that Sands village is deliberately surrounding us shows that our intelligence has been leaked. The route from Konoha to here has been exposed. It is difficult to guarantee that our return route is safe and free of ambushes. I need you to split into 20 teams, retrace your steps, investigate the situation, and then return to Konoha's main camp, report the battle situation to the main camp command center, request assistance from the Hyuga clan's Byakugan, and establish intelligence on a new route from the rear to the front lines." He raised his head, gazing intently at the crowd, and spoke loudly and confidently, "These are the responsibilities each of us must shoulder. We will divide our forces into 3 groups and work together, as Konoha's surprise attack force, carry out a true surprise attack behind enemy lines." Uchiha Shinichi's words clarified the mission for each member of the surprise attack force. The surprise attack team would support Ibure and Ryoma and assist in the destruction of supplies, benefiting them now. The second captain of the city's squadron would lead the Chunin team to destroy the Tsunagakure camp, disrupting the terrain and expanding their gains for future benefits. Meanwhile, 20 teams of 60 genin would explore routes and gather intelligence for the safety of the 2 teams ahead and their retreat. The situation facing this genin team was even more perilous, for they faced an unknown landscape. It's possible they could return to camp safely, leaving no one behind, or they might encounter an ambush and suffer heavy casualties. However, as soon as the words fell, everyone's confusion was instantly resolved. They all looked up and shouted in unison, "Yes!" Seeing the morale of the troops, Uchiha Shinichi nodded with satisfaction. Then, turning his head, he looked at Uchiha Chi, who was being used as a signpost, a map hanging around his neck. He flashed a sly, foxy grin. "I finished, Commander. Do you have anything else to add?" Uchiha Chi stared back expressionlessly, only to reply dryly, "No more." After all, he didn't know how to command. If he were in charge, he would only issue 2 orders, either everyone go home, or hang around as his cheerleaders. What strategic depth, what expanding victory gains, what intelligence gathering? You ask me, what do I even know? Uchiha Shinichi's words were like Irinji making all the arrangements for a case, then asking, Yuan Fang, what do you think? What else can I do? You've said all the good and bad things. Damn it. So I'm just playing the good guy here and getting myself into trouble, right? Damn Uchiha-sama. Too cunning. At this time, Root Ninja B, who was standing by, seemed to notice the obvious embarrassment on Uchiha-C's face. He quietly took a step closer and asked in a low voice, C-sama, This man has seized power without authorization. Do you want me to assassinate him quietly? Cough cough cough. Hearing this, Uchiha Chi couldn't help coughing, then raised his head and looked at B with wide eyes. Whose general is this, and how can he be so brave? Can you say such things in public? Don't you understand the situation? They are the ones who seized power without authorization. Shisui, who had calmed down and got the position of the surprise attack team from Uchiha Chi, was no longer angry. When he heard Uchiha Chi coughing, he looked back in surprise. See, what's wrong with you? Uchiha Chi was like a frightened goose, his body trembled, and he waved his hands repeatedly. It's okay. Then he turned his head and whispered to Root Ninja B, no need, don't say such words that are not conducive to unity in the future, understood? B's eyes curved slightly under the mask, revealing a mischievous smile. At that moment, this cold-blooded Root Ninja, who lived solely for the mission, seemed to have a touch of humanity. After making his arrangements, Uchiha Chi quickly led his men to conduct more detailed planning and discussions. As the leader of the surprise attack force, he was an expert in this area, including how the three groups would communicate with each other after splitting up, how to pass on first-hand intelligence, the specific arrangements after completing the mission, and which terrain should be destroyed to completely destroy the local terrain and render the Sand Village camp strategically useless. Within 5 minutes, Uchiha Chi, who had already established a certain tacit understanding with his subordinates, quickly laid out all the arrangements. Then, the victory and our support are in my hands. He patted Ichiji's shoulder, and Ichiji immediately took action. The entire force was also in motion. Finally, when everything was ready, the expressions on the faces of the ninjas gradually became solemn. The sand in the wind seemed to carry a solemn aura. The night wind quietly blew through the holes in the wind-eroded rock pillars, sending out a long, mournful blast like a horn. The 90-man army, packed and assembled amid the crackling of wildfires, their fighting spirit high, their eyes gleaming with determination. They looked up at the members of the surprise attack team standing atop the massive snake's head. Uchiha Chi, Uchiha Chi, Uchiha Shisui, Inuzuka Akimaru, and Root Ninja B, 5 men and 1 dog, about to set out on a mission. Uchiha Chi took a deep breath, gazed at the bright full moon in the sky, snapped his pocket watch shut, and turned to gaze at the scarred young man beside him. With a snort of laughter, he said, "Time to give the orders, Commander." Yes. Uchiha Chi stood atop the 1,000 snakes, surveying his army below. His gaze held a complexity he couldn't quite articulate. When he chose one man to lead the surprise attack to aid Aburame Ryoma, he had already determined this was a fatal outcome. Chakra depleted, his fighting power dwindling to a fraction, he couldn't imagine how to rescue Aburame Ryoma. But Aburame Ryoma had saved him, treated him with sincerity, and even charged the future 4th Mizukage, a complete no match for him. Regardless of other factors, he had to accept his debt. He couldn't leave him in such a precarious situation, even if it meant death. And now, about to depart on a surprise attack, he wasn't helping them. He was doing so out of selfish motives, with a hope of a desperate outcome. On the contrary, in this moment of near hopelessness, they had reached out to him. With their help, he might actually be able to save Aburame Ryoma. He felt the burning air on the night breeze, the complex, unspoken emotions within him, the heavy, resolute breathing of the people below him, and the pounding of his heart as it grew stronger in his chest. Uchiha Chi suddenly opened his eyes, revealing a pair of scarlet eyes filled with complex emotions of love in the night. Then, he raised his left hand, grasped the hilt of the Kusanagi sword, faced his troops, faced a group of people who extended a helping hand to him. Everyone, Uchiha Chi opened his mouth and said in a clear and resolute voice, "From this moment on, we will divide our troops into 3 groups and launch a surprise attack. Next, let the enemy see our raging flames of war. Let them hear the clanging of our swords, let them know how powerful we are, see the sweat on our foreheads, our backbones, and the courage in our hearts." He suddenly drew out the Kusanagi sword, knocked his heart with the hilt of the sword, opened his eyes wide, and roared loudly, "Now, Konoha surprise attack force, the entire army advances." Chapter 146, Chiao's Poison, Tsunagakure's Secret Hand. Under the night sky, clouds of dust billowed high across the vast Gobi Desert. The Mang Snake, a massive structure the size of a building, carried the members of the surprise attack team, speeding toward the border of the Wind Country, where red smoke drifted. "We're almost at the battlefield, see. How much longer will it take you to refine your chakra?" Standing atop the Mang Snake, Uchiha Shinichi struggled to control it, sweat dripping down the side of his forehead. He couldn't help but glance back. There, a young man sat quietly, moonlight and starlight draped over him like a veil. If I can only refine enough to sustain movement, that's enough now. Uchiha Chi, feeling a sense of urgency, closed his eyes, seizing every moment to refine his chakra. But it's far from enough to sustain combat. His forbidden technique, flesh regeneration, was currently incomplete and imperfect. It couldn't match the effortless growth of an arm that Orochimaru would achieve in the future using his regeneration jutsu. To achieve that level now, he would either have to use a vast amount of chakra or slowly wait for his immortal body to regrow. Therefore, he had given up on repairing his right arm and simply absorbed the anxiety of those around him, converting it into dark chakra, which he then activated through his physical body to regenerate. This relentless work intensity had already exhausted the small zero tail in his abdomen, frequently sending him warnings of a strike. The zero tail wasn't some kind of noble phantasm that granted him the ability to sustain combat. As a rather disgraceful tailed beast, it had numerous shortcomings in all areas, including this seemingly wonderful ability to convert dark chakra. Its efficiency was so low that the future Sky Ninja had to modify the Angkor Fortress to compensate for this ability under extremely special circumstances. P.S. The Zero Tail could only absorb large amounts of chakra in a special room, but it burst after absorbing just a little of the Nine Tails chakra. Therefore, even under the intense pressure of Uchiha Chi, he had only just recovered the equivalent of a Chunin's worth of chakra. This amount of chakra was nearly enough for him to use fire-style chakra mode transformation into fire blades once, even without using the forbidden technique, flesh transformation. Uchiha Shinichi frowned, gritted his teeth, and asked, "My eye power is almost insufficient to control the mandarin snakes. What are you thinking? I can carry you on my back. There's no need to control such a massive creature, that's too much eye power. There's still a battle to come." Shinichi said with difficulty. The mandarin snakes beneath his feet were a completely destabilizing factor for the surprise attack team. But Uchiha Chi insisted that he control the mandarin snakes, refusing to release them no matter how much he tried to dissuade him. To keep him in control, Uchiha Chi even declared, "I can trust you unconditionally in strategy, but in combat, please trust my judgment." Helplessly, Uchiha Shinichi gritted his teeth and continued to cast Sharingan illusions on the giant summoned beast. Wait a little longer. Uchiha Chi gritted his teeth, eyes still closed. "Believe me, I have a feeling the Mang Snake will be of great use in the upcoming operation." Aburane Ryoma's mission was to destroy supplies, not necessarily to engage in a life-or-death battle. As a parasitic worm operator, skilled in assassinations, infiltration behind enemy lines, and intelligence gathering, he had many circuitous ways to accomplish his mission. But at this moment, he chose to release a red flare. This meant he might have encountered an extreme uncertainty, one completely beyond the team's capabilities to handle. And just then, look there, above Mang Snake, Uchiha Shisui opened his Sharingan, gazing into the distance, and suddenly exclaimed, "There's a purple mist in that desert." Uchiha Chi suddenly opened his eyes and saw, above the white expanse of desert in the distance, shrouded in starlight and moonlight, a rising purple mist swirled in a vortex, enveloping a large area of the desert. At its center, a black tornado spun relentlessly at high speed. High above the purple mist, red smoke swirled and rose, the very smoke bombs released by Konoha. Beside him, Akimaru, standing at Inuzuka Akiichi's feet, suddenly erupted in anger. "Woof woof woof!" Inuzuka Akiichi's eyes widened in shock, and he shouted, acting as an interpreter, "That's poisonous fog. It's the poison of Tsunagakure Elder Chiyo." The eye of a tornado is an area where the winds are relatively calm. But this doesn't mean it's free of danger. The center of a tornado isn't a vacuum of zero atmospheric pressure, but rather a funnel-shaped air duct with air pressure. However, the pressure inside is much lower than outside. At that moment, Aburane Ryoma stood grimly in the center of the secret technique he had created, the insect tornado. As the air pressure continued to drop, his expression grew increasingly grim. He felt dizzy, a headache, nauseous, and the beginnings of vomiting, and his limbs felt weak. But this situation pales in comparison to the purple poisonous fog outside. It's the poison of Chiyo, the elder of Sand Village. Tsunade, one of the three ninjas in Konoha, is the only one capable of dispelling it. Even a tiny bit of it will quickly render one powerless, their body disintegrating into a pile of skeletal remains. Even Orochimaru could only give him a bottle of adrenaline and tell him to just fight and escape if he encountered it. The insects are constantly being poisoned. The chakra consumption of maintaining the insect tornado is enormous. The most important thing is, I don't even know who I'm fighting. Aburame Ryoma's face grimaced. He crouched on the ground, his palms planted in the sand, continuously sending out parasitic insects to sense the outside world. However, as soon as the insects emerged from the poisonous fog, before they could relay any information back to him, they were instantly killed by the sharp objects. Not a single one survived. What was out there? How many people were there? Who had orchestrated this plan against him? He knew nothing. The mystic art, insect tornado became his only barrier, forcing him to survive in this cramped, unbearable space. He had attempted to unleash a massive swarm of parasitic queens all at once, using the mystic art, insect cocoon to rapidly hatch an even larger number of parasitic worms, thus forming the mystic art, insect swamp, a map-wide AoE attack, in an attempt to reverse the situation. However, the unassuming, easily overlooked queens had barely been released, and before they could begin hatching, a cold, elderly voice shouted calmly, "Sealing art, lion's roar." The next moment, all contact with the queens was lost. Hearing this deliberately muffled voice and this unprecedented power, Aburame Ryoma felt a chill run down his spine. He had no way of determining the enemy's identity or their capabilities. He only knew that, as the route's deputy commander, he usually operated alone, yet his intelligence had been completely compromised by the enemy, and they had been so deliberately targeted. So, when had his intelligence been leaked? Aburame Ryoma's face grimaced. Amidst the exhaustion from lack of oxygen and excessive chakra depletion, his mind replayed a series of flashbacks until it finally settled on the mission in Uchiha Castle, the capital of the land of hot springs. On that day, Orochimaru, who had returned to the route, assumed the role of Sannin and participated in the overall strategic planning of the Third Shinobi World War, had suddenly and earnestly requested that Ryoma, who was about to depart for the land of hot springs, help him bring back his disciple. Normally composed, Ryoma was deeply surprised that day. After that, he led his men to Tangayan City, fought fiercely against Gaji Yagura, stopped the Kurigakure offensive, and manipulated the countries with intelligence. Then, he met his stupid subordinate, a young man as dazzling as the sun. I see, it was on that day that the intelligence was collected. Then, my opponent, who is in the Sand Village camp, possesses such a strong toxin, and has such a sophisticated and interconnected strategic design and intelligence gathering ability. It should be you. Aburame Ryoma's eyes suddenly became sharp under his sunglasses. He raised his head, penetrated the secret technique of the insect tornado, and looked at the outside world, at the old and frail old man who is nowhere to be found. A veteran strongman who perfectly combines poison with puppetry and wind escape ninjutsu. To this day, he still has a large number of secret lines in various countries, controlling many ninja secrets like a puppet. The former king of espionage, now the powerful elder of Sand Village, secret hand of the sand, Ebizo. Chapter 147, Heaven's Curse. Sandstorm Burial. Realizing the outsiders were targeting him, Ebizo, a veteran of the Tsunagakure clan and a fellow intelligence and espionage expert, Aburame Ryoma's heart sank. Now, everything made sense. This sudden intelligence, this secret shipment of supplies, had seemingly sparked a surprise attack on Tsunagakure by Konoha. In reality, it was a deliberate plot by the enemy, a meticulously orchestrated operation to lure Konoha into attacking. They were waiting, like baiting a turtle with a pig's liver, for the turtle to bite and fall into their trap. Now, he was trapped. Looks like this is the end for me. Aburame Ryoma gazed up at the poisonous purple mist swirling around the insect tornado. The strength in his limbs seemed to drain him instantly. He sighed weakly. Even though he knew the answer, he was trapped in the situation. No matter how hard he struggled, if he couldn't escape the poisonous fog, he would be doomed. Thinking of this, he tilted his head, his expression grim as he stared eastward. Tisk, the intelligence can't be delivered. The surprise attack force must be in a tough fight now. I hope that kid figures this out quickly, then, run. With another sudden sigh, he gazed at the thinning insect tornadoes in the poisonous fog, the parasitic insects falling one after another, slain by the poison. The venomous fog was almost seeping in. Aburame Ryoma slowly closed his eyes, silently awaiting death. But then, a clear, young man's roar instantly pierced the toxic fog, the wind, and the tornadoes. Abir and Ryoma, get down, then, bang. A roar and a sandstorm filled the sky, obscuring the sun. A sudden change of events. Those standing by the purple mist are the Tsunagakure Anbu, Uchiha Shisui, standing atop Manzo, explained with a solemn expression. 30 men, the size of a Tsunagakure squadron, and the one leading them, he looks like Ebuzo, the younger brother of Tsunagakure elder Chiyo. Inuzuka Akimaru exclaimed in shock, what the hell, why is the Tsunagakure frontline commander here? Woof, Akimaru exclaimed, his body trembling uncontrollably. For a moment, shock flashed across the faces of the four on the scene. Ebuzo, that's on the same level as Orochimaru and Jiraiya, the three high-ranking ninjas in their camp. Upon hearing this, Uchiha Chi quietly activated his Sharingan, crossed his legs, and gazed solemnly at the elite Tsunagakure soldiers surrounding the purple mist. He focused his gaze on the old man, dressed in a black robe, a heavy white turban, and a hood, his hair and beard white. A flash of understanding crossed his eyes. He had long since realized something was amiss. It now appeared that their entire raid was a deliberate trap set by the Tsunagakure. Using the fourth Kazekage, Raza, as bait, they intended to sell him out, gain an advantage on other fronts, and further weaken Konoha's forces. The life or death of Raza, newly appointed fourth Kazekage, was practically irrelevant to the Tsunagakure top brass. It went without saying that if the Tsunagakure could sell out Hakura, they could certainly sell out Raza, especially given the option. And desperate to prove himself and secure his position as Kazekage, Raza had no choice but to accept this high-risk mission as bait. Why would a Kazekage be needed for diplomatic missions and negotiations? The Tsunagakure wanted victory. Victory by any means necessary. At this point, the core reason that drove the Tsunagakure to declare war on Konoha, sparking the Third Shinobi World War, wasn't the disappearance of the third Kazekage, nor was it their desire to invade Konoha, a place they clearly couldn't defeat. It was the daimyo. They desperately needed a victory to change the newly appointed daimyo's idiotic decision to cut Tsunagakure's military spending. At this point, the Sand Village was on the verge of madness. Faced with the actions of these near-mad beasts, Uchiha Chi knew that only by becoming even more insane, only by driving the drill into their fingernails, only by making them feel such excruciating pain, could he subdue these barbarians. Seeing this, he no longer hesitated. He swung a kunai from his waist and plunged it fiercely into the crevices of the snake's scales, piercing deep into its flesh. He raised his fingers and tugged at the silk thread binding it, confirming its tightness. Uchiha Chi suddenly stood up and addressed Uchiha Shinichi, who was controlling the mang snakes, in a deep voice. Now is the time, Shinichi, go down now and break the Genjutsu. Uchiha Shinichi looked up in surprise. What are you going to do? Uchiha Chi said nothing, simply staring at him sternly and asking solemnly, can you trust me? Shinichi gave Uchiha Chi a deep look, gritted his teeth slightly, then turned back to the other three and said in a deep voice, let's go down. Shisui and Inuzuka Akachi exchanged glances and nodded. Following Uchiha Chi's gaze, Root Ninja B jumped down together. Uchiha Chi stepped forward, reaching the mang snake's noses. He turned, illuminated his Sharingan, and waited quietly. The Genjutsu that had been controlling the mang snakes for so long was quietly lifted the moment Shinichi and the others landed. The mang snake's muffled, yet resonant, breathing suddenly became rapid. The three Magatama Sharingan pattern within its pupils quietly faded, revealing a pair of indifferent, ruthless golden irises. Hiss, regaining consciousness, the man snake erupted in fury. Staring at Uchiha Chi before him, its pupils shrank to the size of pins. Idiot brat, I'm going to eat you. Uchiha Chi calmly raised his eyes, then suddenly widened. The bloodshot whites of his eyes and the eerie scarlet Sharingan were deeply captured by the man snake's vision. Illusion, Sharingan. The next moment, a massive purple serpent suddenly soared from the desert, its massive body rising high like a skyscraper. Then, Uchiha Chi's expression darkened, and he leaped from the serpent's head, suddenly dropping. Then, the building collapsed instantly, and the man snake's enormous purple tail lashed out, slashing horizontally across the two towering sand dunes like a scourge from the gods. The raging wind blew down like a razor blade, lifting Uchiha Chi's hair high and causing the hems of his tattered robes to rip and rustle. Uchiha Chi's mouth was blown open, exposing his teeth and pulling his face back violently. Instantly, the sand dunes exploded with a roar. As the wind and sandstorm rose high, Uchiha Chi struggled to raise his Sharingan, mentally calculating his position. He flexed his left fingers, adjusting his position in midair. Then, with a sudden release, he launched himself like a cannonball, riding the sky-blackening sandstorm and shooting towards the purple mist-shrouded sand village gathering place. I'm here to save you, Aburame Ryoma. Braving the wind, he watched the sand villagers, whose size gradually grew larger than ants, grow larger in his field of vision. Uchiha Chi raised his lip in a fierce frown, clasping his left hand fiercely at his neck. Heaven's curse seal. The next moment, dense black jade patterns crawled all over his body, making Uchiha Chi's delicate face look like a demon. He glided through the air, roaring in the wind, amidst the roar of the sky and the sandstorm. With one hand he formed a tiger seal, raised his sword finger, and pointed it downwards. The young man's clear roar instantly pierced through the poisonous fog, wind, and tornado. Aburame Ryoma, get down. Chapter 148, Strong Wind Blows, Confront Ebizo. The violent wind whipped up by the 10,000 snakes instantly struck. A tsunami-like explosion of sand washed over them, and the hurricane instantly dispersed the purple, poisonous mist enveloping the secret technique, the insect tornado. Even the spinning insect tornado was swallowed by the sandstorm. What's that? Could it be Lord Raza? Several Tsunagakure Anbu looked up in astonishment, their eyes etched with even greater surprise. Wait, what's that? Someone's flying in the wind. Hearing this, even Ebizo, standing at the back of the squadron, tilted his head slightly and gazed skyward. Seeing the young man soaring like a kite in midair, a hint of surprise crossed Ebizo's face. Orochimaru, how dare he send his disciple to such a place? But it doesn't matter. We can kill him all at once. Ebizo narrowed his eyes, a murderous glint rising in them. With a wave of his hand, he withdrew a scroll and summoned a white-robed puppet. Before the other sand villagers could react, Uchiha Chi, mid-air, raised the tiger seal to his lips and unleashed 3 massive fireballs at the sand village. Using the recoil from his blasts, he controlled his form mid-air, performing several somersaults and tumbling to the ground like an acrobat. He dug his palms into the sand to halt his momentum, landing right in front of Aburame Ryoma. A strong wind whipped past, rustling his tattered robes. Cough, cough, cough. Aburame Ryoma climbed out of the sand, coughing up 2 mouthfuls of sand. He looked up to see Uchiha Chi standing before him, his vision dazed. He quickly recovered, his brow furrowing. You, alright, you're welcome, Uchiha Chi grinned, glancing sideways. The cursed lines across half his face gave him a sinister look. He said simply, say something useful. I can't hold out much longer. An uncontrollable force surged from the heavenly curse seal. This was the first time he had used it since receiving it from Orochimaru. It seemed the seal's power had strengthened his body, significantly increasing his control over it. He was even able to unleash a basic fire style with a single hand. Along with this, a chilling energy surged. Under its influence, pimples began to form on his skin. Upon closer inspection, they were tiny scales. There was also a feeling of something about to bulge out on either side of his forehead. This gave Uchiha Chi a premonition. His heavenly curse seal was completely different from the future Sasuke's complete form, where he sprouted wings, or Kumamoto's lizard tail. His transformation was more like a snake, or rather, a dragon. It was more like the future, transformed sage mode form of Orochimaru's son, Mitsuki. The seal Orochimaru had injected into him seemed to contain pure, untransformed Ryashido Senjutsu chakra. This was clearly more powerful, but it also presented a corresponding problem. This energy was extremely difficult to control, making it impossible to amplify ninjutsu and transform it into senjutsu. The immediate advantage was that this first form of the seal dramatically increased his physical strength and control. The disadvantage was that the force, seemingly natural energy within him, was rapidly transforming his body. If this continued, he might soon genetically mutate into a snake. This was something that even Orochimaru hadn't yet fully understood. But Uchiha Chi had no other choice. Facing a veteran Tsunagakure expert like Ebizo, at least a cage-level figure, he could only bite the bullet and reveal his last trump card. Otherwise, he doubted he could last more than half a minute in his current physical condition. Just like that moment, a sharp, invisible wind blade hurtled straight towards Uchiha Chi's head. It was incredibly fast, almost indescribably so. Before Uchiha Chi could react, his body had already moved, and instinctively he dodged the blow by turning his head. Elsewhere, a sudden, puffing sound echoed as the wind blade blasted through the protective spheres of Aburame Ryoma's armor, hurling itself far before his horrified gaze, until it pierced a sand dune and pierced deeply. Uchiha Chi turned his head, his expression grave. Behind the 30-man Tsunagakure squadron ahead of him, Ebizo, dressed in black robes and a white turban, raised his eyebrows slightly, expressing surprise that Uchiha Chi had dodged the attack. At this moment, Ebizo raised one hand, and a razor-sharp wind blade shone from his fingertips. Wind style, wind blade. This A-rank wind style jutsu involves radiating chakra from the fingertips like a sharp blade, striking the enemy with a gust of wind. Using the whirlwind technique to transform the wind into a blade is an unavoidable move. Invisible and colorless, it's difficult to detect. During the future Konoha collapse plan, Tsunagakure Jonin Maki wielded it to brutally kill Konoha's special genin, Gekauhei 8. And now, in Ebizo's hands at this stage, this technique is only going to be even more powerful. Uchiha Chi's gaze narrowed, no longer dwelling on the damage done to his body by the Heaven's Curse seal. He glanced cautiously at the 30-man squadron surrounding him from Tsunagakure and, behind them, the unsightly old man who calmly surveyed the situation, poised for a surprise attack. Behind him, facing this menacing situation, Aburame Ryoma's expression darkened, and he stopped questioning Uchiha Chi's origins. With a broken arm, he knew he wasn't in good shape. He shook his head, exhaled deeply, and cast a pointed glance at Ebizo. Then tell me something useful. He supported Uchiha Chi's shoulders and struggled to his feet, glancing around solemnly. Then, he quietly pulled a kunai from his ninja tool bag and, shoulder to shoulder, thrust it into Uchiha Chi's hand. Uchiha Chi remained impassive, but inwardly, he was startled. With his mastery of shuriken jutsu, he could gauge the style and weight of any kunai with a single blow. At that moment, Aburame Ryoma quietly placed a special kunai in his hand. Listen, Aburame Ryoma handed over his special kunai and said in a deep voice, see, this operation is very different from what you imagined. All these actions, all these sacrifices, are for only one purpose. Aburame Ryoma's expression darkened, and he said solemnly, that is, to kill Ebizo, the high-ranking commander of Tsunagakure in this war. Now, the time has come, then what we need to do next is obvious. A hint of madness flashed in Aburame Ryoma's eyes under his sunglasses. He immediately pulled a flare from his ninja tool bag and threw it into the sky. In the night, a fifth orange flare, completely different from the four red, yellow, blue and green flares, exploded. In the sky, a stream of orange smoke drifted up. Uchiha Chi blinked his eyes, took a deep breath, and suddenly his spirits lifted. He immediately stuffed the kunai into his ninja tool bag, turned around and slapped Aburame Ryoma hard on the shoulder. I understand. Uchiha Chi's eyes were firm. Then please take my people to retreat. Leave this here to me. Aburame Ryoma was stunned. Wait, what are you going to do? He was about to raise his hand to stop him, but he saw that Uchiha Chi had turned around, lowered his head, leaned forward and sprinted, and jumped into the encirclement of 30 people on the opposite side. He couldn't help but feel a tingling scalp, and after a moment of silence, he said the second half of the sentence, fuck, I asked you to delay time with me and wait for help. Chapter 149, Charge. Ebizo prepares for a marathon. Bang! With a blast in the sky, a column of orange smoke drifted straight up. Like a sharp arrow ripping through the long darkness, the roles of hunter and prey were instantly reversed. Instantly, 10 miles away, 20 miles away, 30 miles away. Almost at the same instant, orange flares soared high into the sky. Following closely, a yellow flash streaked across the battlefield. Uchiha Chi, clutching his kunai, took a deep breath as he gazed at the word sword of ninja love above him. His eyes flashed fiercely, and he sped off, leaping high. He understood it all. Tonight's surprise attack hadn't been aimed at the fourth Kazakage, Raza, from the very beginning. At the very moment Tsunagakure desired victory, Konoha, having endured 3 rounds of attacks and stood at attention for so long, needed a decisive victory as well. Tsunagakure, using intelligence and Raza's had to lure Konoha into a 3-way attack, intended to leverage their intelligence advantage on the battlefield to achieve a decisive victory. Konoha, however, capitalized on the situation, offering chips in every direction that would tempt Tsunagakure's supreme commander. The life of the fourth Kazakage, a decisive victory on the front lines, and right here, the opportunity to wipe out Konoha's intelligence hub and slay Ryoma Aburame, the route's deputy commander, active behind enemy lines. Ebizo, perceptive, chose the safest and most reliable option. To that end, he devised a series of desperate strategies targeting Ryoma Aburame, completely rendering him defenseless and preventing even the slightest intelligence transmission. But now, all this was shattered by Uchiha Chi, planted in the surprise attack force by Orochimaru. The tide had turned in an instant. Ebizo had taken the bait, and Konoha's goal was achieved. Killing Ebizo would deal a far greater blow to Tsunagakure than assassinating the fourth Kazekage. The former was a renowned espionage master, a battlefield commander, and the brains of the entire Tsunagakure frontline. The latter was a young pawn hastily thrust into the spotlight. The choice was clear. Aburame Ryoma's words, that all actions and sacrifices were for this moment, were no joke. The moment he laid eyes on the sort of ninja love that had belonged to Minato Namikaze, Uchiha Chi instantly connected everything he had seen, understanding it all. But he couldn't accept it. He couldn't accept it. Orochimaru's calculations were accurate. He calculated that his abilities, combined with Mandarin Snake's, would barely be enough to defeat the 300 Tsunagakure formations. If it weren't for that unexpected grenade explosion, he would have been exhausted and saved by the root second ninja. It would be Konoha's surprise attack force that would have rushed here. Before Minato Namikaze arrived, Aburame Ryoma and this force would be sacrificed to buy time. It would be his people who would die. Orochimaru, you're so fucking despicable, Uchiha Chi roared, leaping into the enemy lines. He ducked, arching his body like a sharp arrow, gliding across the ground with a swift movement, stirring up a cloud of dust. He raised his tiger seal and, rising, unleashed a dozen fireballs like impatience seeds. Fire style, Phoenix Fire Jutsu, with his body strengthened by the Heaven's Curse seal, he formed a single seal with one hand, unleashing a sudden and unexpected fireball. The Tsunagakure standing in Uchiha Chi's way was stunned, wondering why this kid was cursing Orochimaru and wanted to hide him. Before he could react, he was instantly blown away by the whirling fireball. Uchiha Chi leaped up, wrenching the Tsunagakure's sword with one hand, forming the sea seal with his fingertips. Water style, Water Fang blade instantly covered the sword, emitting a strange squeak. He spun in mid-air, hurling the Water Fang blade with great force, striking down another Tsunagakure standing in his way. His feet touched the ground, twisting, and charging again. He felt the alienated energy within him increasingly eroding his body as his chakra flowed. His vision suddenly shifted, as if equipped with a 360-degree infrared sensor. Clearly, he could see all around him, a line of Tsunagakure Anbu, carrying puppets on their backs, under Ebizo's command, swiftly approached. Their strategic positioning placed them squarely on his path, forcing him into a corner. Then, one of the Tsunagakure smirked sinisterly. Puppetry technique, poison mist spray. The puppet strings between their fingers twitched, and 10 puppets opened their mouths, spewing a puff of green mist at him. Uchiha Chi's Sharingan jumped, realizing the immense range of this attack, making it impossible to dodge. He held his breath, formed a hand seal, and prepared to unleash wind-style, sky-slashing extreme wave. The opposing Tsunagakure, seemingly anticipating Uchiha Chi's intelligence, slapped a puppet, and it instantly opened its lattice and unleashed a massive arrow like a crossbow, aiming to pierce through the wind-style and pin him dead on the spot. At that moment, a towering figure clad in the standard Uchiha robes and a Jonin vest leaped into the formation. Fire style, Dragon Flame Song Jutsu, 4 fiery dragons lashed out from all 4 directions, front, back, left, and right, with a 100% hit rate. They instantly blasted a Tsunagakure Anbu standing in front of Uchiha Chi away, creating a gap in his path. See, go ahead, whatever you want to do. Uchiha Shinichi flashed his 3 Magatama Sharingan, gazing at the 9 Tsunagakure puppeteers before him. Standing back to back with Uchiha Chi, he shouted in a deep voice, "Leave this to me." Uchiha Chi gritted his teeth, realizing his opportunity was now. With a fierce glare, he charged out of the formation, charging directly towards Ebizo, who was standing behind the enemy lines. At that moment, Ebizo stared at the orange smoke exploding in the sky, his brow furrowing as he realized the situation was dire. He sighed, knowing his mission had failed and he had to retreat. If it were just Aburame Ryoma and the surprise attack force, he might have slaughtered them all before leaving. However, looking at Uchiha Chi, who rushed towards him, trying to delay him, he shook his head. He had also gathered a lot of intel on this brat, and he was a formidable opponent. He couldn't kill him if he stood out, and wasting time with him would lead to nothing good. So, he calmly glanced at the charging Uchiha Chi, sneered softly, and said, "Child, stop struggling, I have all the intel on you. You can't stop me, so, that's it." With that, Ebizo calmly waved his hand. From all sides, A group of Tsunagakure swarmed over, blocking his way. And behind the formation, Ebizo, the little old man, actually took on a marathon running stance, just like Danzo in the future 5-cage tournament, turning and fleeing. Seeing this, Uchiha's pupils suddenly shrank, and he charged, shouting, "Fuck. You actually want to run, coward. Old dog, kill me before you leave." In front of Uchiha, a group of Tsunagakure with stern faces. 3 of them sneered and brandished huge gauze scrolls, casting the sealing jutsu, cloth-binding jutsu at Uchiha. "Kid, you're a real freak. As an Uchiha, you don't even know Jinjutsu, then, this means you're doomed to die here." With this pronouncement, 2 Tsunagakure quietly formed hand seals. One began to cast a Jinjutsu towards Uchiha, while the other raised his hand to summon his puppet. With a press of his palm, the puppet was about to use the puppet jutsu, wielding a blade to execute Uchiha on the spot. The other sand villagers also unleashed their signature techniques, ninjutsu, jinjutsu, and puppetry, all aimed at Uchiha. For a moment, the myriad ninjutsu transformed the nighttime desert into a vibrant, daylight scene. Uchiha's pupils suddenly constricted. These sand village Anbu were truly the underlings of the old man, Ebizo. Each one was a crack warrior. Judging from their aura, they were all, conservatively, considered at least special genin or higher. Every ninjutsu held hidden murderous intent. Each one targeted Uchiha's weaknesses, various poisons, jinjutsu control, sealing techniques, and puppet binding techniques. Watching them, Uchiha felt as if he were seeing a vast expanse of Eligi before him. The power of these men was simply nauseating. Silently, Uchiha's vision twisted. The desert battle scene, previously shrouded in murderous intent, had transformed into a meadow filled with birdsong and fragrant flowers. This was the magical, non-existent jutsu. A sand villager had unleashed this illusion upon Uchiha. "Damn it. I'm weak at illusions, but I'm not blind." Uchiha gritted his teeth, his eyes wide open as he gazed at the scene before him, a scene of birdsong and flowers, yet concealing murderous intent. The Sharingan's Magadama twirled within his eyes, and he unleashed the illusion, mirror of heaven and earth. Instantly, he used the eye-breaking technique taught to him by Uchiha Shinichi, and with his eye power, he charged forward, instantly shattering the scene before him. Chapter 150, Snake Pupils, Cursed Sharingan. Passionate Race. The illusion, mirror heaven and earth, swirled. The scene before him resembled glass pierced by a bullet, and countless spider webs instantly appeared. Then, with a resounding bang, it shattered. The illusion was broken, and the ninja who had cast it suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at Uchiha with shock, exclaiming, "Damn it! It doesn't match the information, that brat, he can do illusions." The Tsunagakure ninja were startled, and upon learning this information, they immediately turned their gaze away, not daring to meet Uchiha's gaze. The Tsunagakure Anbu present were all elite members of the Tsunagakure Anbu. How could they not know the intractable nature of the Uchiha Sharingan? Uchiha raised his head slightly, his gaze fixed on the ninja who had cast the illusion upon the Tsunagakure crowd. The dark pupils within his crimson eyes gradually contracted under the influence of the Heaven's Curse seal, narrowing into snake-like vertical pupils. 2 dark Magadamas stopped rotating, fixed on either side of the pupils. These eyes appeared eerie yet possessed a strange beauty, like a celestial being plucked from the pages of myth. Instinctively, Uchiha felt he could not only deflect this illusion, but even retaliate with a magical shackle technique using his Sharingan. Under the 360-degree infrared sensor-like field of view, even though all the Tsunagakure in front of him immediately sensed something was amiss and averted their gazes, avoiding direct eye contact, they seemed to have already made eye contact with him. They all seemed to be within the range of his eye technique. But just as Uchiha was about to realize this thought, he felt an inexplicable chill creeping through his veins, as if doing so would cause his eyes to undergo an irreversible transformation. In that moment of daze, a cold shout echoed from the front, "Kill him, wind style, wind-cutting technique, puppet technique, thousand rains." Suddenly, the Tsunagakure Anbu unleashed their various methods. Seeing this, Uchiha's snake pupils shrank sharply, not caring about the side effects or what might happen next. Now, exhausted, he could only rely on the power granted by the Heaven's Curse seal to fight. Therefore, he had no choice but to trust in the Heaven's Curse seal. His eyes suddenly opened wide, and dense bloodshot veins in his eyeballs instantly connected to his crimson pupils. The icy natural energy of the Raichi cave coursed through his veins and rushed into his Sharingan. A stream of blood and tears suddenly flowed from his eye sockets, and invisible pupil power was activated and shut out. Under the vision of the snake-eyed Sharingan, it pounced and bit everyone in sight. Magical, the Jaghang technique. The Tsunagakure felt a sudden chill in their bodies, as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. Before they could process what had happened, the chilling sensation vanished in an instant. See, what are you daydreaming about? At that moment, a hand suddenly pulled Uchiha Chi backward, interrupting the technique. Uchiha Shisui, Inuzuka Mingai, and Root Ninja B instantly leaped into the center of the battlefield, forming a V-shaped formation to protect Uchiha Chi. Shisui's childish face was filled with solemnity. He drew his wakizashi, gripping the handle with one hand and resting his fingertips against the blade with the other. Leave this to us. Brother Ming, you take the left side, and Brother Yi, you take the right side. Leave all those in the middle to me. Shisui gritted his teeth, his crimson eyes reflecting his all-consuming determination and will as he stared at Uchiha Chi. Uchiha Chi, go, serve as a bridge between the clan and the village. Your way, will protect your back. The interruption of his eye technique left Uchiha Chi in a trance, and then he saw the Uchiha Shisui before him suddenly split apart. Suddenly, a dozen or so Uchiha Shisui appeared before him, each so tangible that even with his Sharingan, he couldn't tell which was the real one. A group of Shisui charged forward, spitting out a stream of dragon fire, tearing a hole through the crowd before them. Two Utogayas wreaked havoc on the left flank, while you charged into the right, employing masterful swordsmanship and earth escape techniques to fend off the enemy. Gazing at the gap his teammates had opened for him, and Ebizo already scurrying far behind it, Uchiha Chi's eyes narrowed, and he clenched his teeth. It's like this again, it's like this again, every time the critical moment comes, you just fucking try to escape. What a bunch of cowards, what a bunch of cowards. His chakra surged with a chilling energy, all directed towards his thighs and calves, further deepening the transformation of the Heaven's Curse seal. The muscles in his thighs and calves twisted, genetically altering, strengthening his legs and lengthening their lines. The pitch-black lines of the Heaven's Curse seal clung to his legs, forming a dense pattern. Uchiha Chi's eyes narrowed, his feet twisting, and everything before him instantly transformed into lines so indistinguishable that he leaped out of the gap, charging and charging like a swift black mamba on the hunt, his eyes fixed on Ebizo's fleeing form, his crimson eyes filled with murderous intent. Damn it, if you don't kill me today, no one's leaving. He clasped his hands behind his back and sprinted frantically across the desert, like an arrow shot into the darkness at dusk. The surging wind piled up in front of him, deforming and creating a sonic boom. A tsunami of dust rose up. He and Ebizo, one chasing the other, the distance between them rapidly closed under the explosive power of the Heaven's Curse seal. At this moment, Ebizo ripped open his black robe and windproof face with a single slap, revealing a muscular, toned figure beneath. He straightened his back, swinging his arms rhythmically, a smug smile on his wrinkled face. In the land of wind, no one knows how to escape better than me. As a master of wind escape, Ebizo had mastered this scientific running method without a teacher, incorporating it into his technique, greatly increasing the ninja's speed in windy and sandy conditions. At this speed, brat, you can't even see the sand I'm kicking up, Ebizo grinned triumphantly, his legs accelerating as his arms swung, sending a cloud of sand flying behind him. He tilted his head slightly, hoping to catch the young brat's face, nearly despairing at the loss of his goal. But he probably couldn't see it. After all, he'd already taken off running, and now he couldn't even hear the sounds of the elite Tsunagakure guarding his escape. The brat must have crouched on the ground in despair, helplessly calling for his mother. Thinking of this, Ebizo's lips curled in the uniquely old man's amusement. He turned his head slightly, peering back with a raised brow. The next moment, his smile froze. Less than 100 meters behind him, the Uchiha brat was charging towards him, a tsunami-like sandstorm surging from behind. Damn it! Ebizo's heart skipped a beat, and his eyes widened in disbelief. What the hell? This is too fast. How could this kid be so fast? Uchiha Chi, with a crazy look on his face, raised his head and stared at him with his scarlet snake pupils. A sinister smile immediately appeared on his face. Old man, where do you want to run to? Stop. Uchiha Chi took a deep breath, pressed down and dived. His speed increased again, and in the blink of an eye he closed the distance again, until they were shoulder to shoulder, or even overtook. His feet dug into the cold sands in the night wind, pulling out a ravine of nearly 100 meters. As he braked to stop, he raised his left hand and slapped it on the desert. It's time to explode the gold coins, Super Death Battle Barrier. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.